In the heart of Buenos Aires, Argentina, a vibrant soul named Natalia Melman came into the world on the 13th of March in the year 1986. She was the third child in a family of 4, comprising 2 boys and 2 girls, born to the loving couple of Gustavo and Laura. Theirs was a comfortable middle-class household, sustained by the hard work of her parents. When young Natalia was just 6 years old, her parents made a life-altering decision. They decided to uproot their family and seek a new beginning in Miramar, affectionately known as the City of Children. The Melman family longed for a serene environment that would connect them with nature, shield them from the hustle and pollution of bustling cities, and enable them to build a harmonious life together. Their journey led them to Miramar on the 7th of November in 1992. Nestled on the Atlantic Ocean coast, Miramar enchanted with its picturesque landscapes and captivating beaches. Its population hovered around 35,000 residents, and the city's economy thrived during the vibrant summer tourist season. Agriculture and agro-industry played significant roles. As the year 2001 dawned, Natalia found herself immersed in her studies at high school. She was a brilliant student, consistently achieving top-notch grades. However, her commitment to academics did not hinder her sociability. Among her peers, she was celebrated for her infectious cheerfulness and outgoing nature. Such qualities led to her being chosen as the class representative, a testament to her popularity. Yet, like any typical young person, Natalia cherished her moments of leisure. She frequently embarked on adventures to various dance venues, where the rhythm of life blended with her youthful spirit. In the vibrant nightlife of Argentina, these venues are commonly referred to as boliches, and they often attract a young, enthusiastic crowd. Natalia, a bright and determined young woman, had a clear sense of how to balance her pursuit of fun without compromising her aspirations. She was deeply committed to her responsibilities and had her eyes set on a future that held a special place in her heart. A future in medicine, with a particular fascination for obstetrics, where she envisioned herself helping bring new life into the world. Natalia possessed a level of maturity and charisma that made her seem older than her years, endearing her to a wide circle of friends. Despite being in a relationship, she confided in her close friends about lingering feelings for her previous boyfriend, who had also moved on to a new romance. Her mother fondly remembered her as a passionate and loving young woman. On the evening of Saturday, February 3, 2001, just 1 month shy of her 15th birthday, Natalia found herself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. Weary from overthinking and worrying, she decided to embark on a night out with 2 of her friends, seeking a temporary escape and a chance to clear her mind. Their night led them through several establishments, beginning with La Cantina, a bar situated just a stone's throw away from Miramar's picturesque pier. Later, they ventured to Amadeus, another bustling locale in Miramar, a short distance from their initial stop. As the early hours of Sunday, February 4, approached, Natalia unexpectedly crossed paths with her ex-boyfriend, Juan Maximiliano. She contemplated striking up a conversation, driven by a desire to rekindle their romance, but was disheartened to find him in the company of another girl named Diana. Faced with this disheartening scene, Natalia made the decision to leave the bar and head back home. Dawn was breaking, and Natalia had experienced a tumultuous night characterized by moments of joy interspersed with spells of sadness. Her emotional state fluctuated from laughter to introspection in the blink of an eye. At around 7 in the morning on that fateful Sunday, February 4, Natalia bid her friends farewell, unaware of the harrowing ordeal awaiting her. As she walked away from the bar, a sense of vulnerability and solitude accompanied her, the residue of the night's mixed emotions. Unbeknownst to her, a man named Gustavo Fernandez, often referred to as El Gallo, had begun trailing her from a distance. Gustavo was a figure with a troubled history. In those early 2000s, at the age of 30, he carried a past marked by incarceration. In the pre-dawn hours of February 4, he had been present at one of the entertainment venues Natalia and her friends had visited. During this pivotal moment, a sinister plot had been set in motion. Gustavo, while enjoying himself at the bar, was approached by 3 officers from the Buenos Aires Province Police. These officers joined Gustavo, and together they concocted a disturbing plan. While Natalia had ventured several streets away from the bar, lost in her thoughts and weary from a night of dancing, an unexpected police patrol pulled up beside her. Gustavo, who had been surreptitiously tailing her, launched a shocking assault. A violent struggle ensued as he forcefully attempted to coerce Natalia into the patrol vehicle. Initially, he resorted to physical aggression, striking and pushing her. Despite her brave resistance, Natalia was overpowered by the sheer strength of her assailant. In a harried and alarming manner, Gustavo succeeded in placing her inside the trunk of the vehicle. Remarkably, Gustavo then continued to walk away nonchalantly, as if nothing untoward had occurred. Meanwhile, the 3 police officers sped off with Natalia towards the outskirts of the city. Their destination was a rustic cabin in an area devoid of basic amenities like water and electricity. It was a remote and desolate location chosen as part of their sinister plan. Back at the Melman family's home, the arrival of the morning on Sunday, February 4, initially seemed like any other day but swiftly transformed into a day of anguish. Laura, Natalia's mother, sensed that something was amiss when her daughter failed to return home for the night. Natalia had always been diligent about communicating her plans and whereabouts, making her absence deeply unsettling. Laura contacted Gustavo, Natalia's father, and together they embarked on a mission to visit Natalia's friends' homes to gather information. Filled with a lot of doubts and growing concern, they engaged in conversations with Natalia's friends. It was during these conversations that they pieced together the events of the previous night, including Natalia's movements before leaving the bar. Upon learning about the places Natalia had visited and the events leading up to her departure from the bar, Laura and Gustavo initiated a search. They checked local hospitals, beaches, and various locations throughout Miramar, desperately searching for any sign of their daughter. However, their efforts yielded no results, and as night descended, they were left utterly distraught and without any clues regarding Natalia's whereabouts. In their mounting despair, Natalia's parents made the heart-wrenching decision to report her as missing. When they reached out to the authorities, the officers they encountered classified the incident as a case of a runaway from home rather than a disappearance. This unusual turn of events marked the beginning of a series of suspicions and irregularities that would soon unfold. Gustavo and Laura couldn't bear to think in the worst possibilities, but the unnerving silence from Natalia confirmed that she was being prevented from reaching out to them. Natalia's disappearance was far from a voluntary act on her part. The initial response from the police raised eyebrows due to their apparent lack of urgency in the case. By February 5th, local media outlets had started featuring Natalia's face, and soon, national media joined the coverage, all reporting on the young girl's disappearance. As Natalia's family and friends tirelessly sought answers, witnesses gradually emerged, confirming they had seen Natalia leaving the bar, with Gustavo following her as she moved away. Simultaneously, in a show of support for the family and concern for Natalia's welfare, the Miramar municipality provided Laura and Gustavo with an office space. At that point, they lacked even a telephone to gather information about their daughter. This space became a hub for people to share leads and provide crucial details regarding the case. Laura and Gustavo were determined to uncover the truth surrounding their daughter's disappearance. The office's glass front was covered with posters bearing Natalia's face, serving a dual purpose: to keep their daughter's image at the forefront of everyone's minds and to ensure the confidentiality of those coming forward with information. In the days following Natalia's disappearance, extensive search efforts spanned various areas of Miramar and even extended to Mar del Sur, a locality approximately 20 kilometers away, based on reports of Natalia being seen in the area. The police conducted various operations, interviewed potential witnesses, and established traffic checkpoints, but regrettably, these efforts bore no fruit. Simultaneously, rumors began to circulate, suggesting possible police involvement in Natalia's disappearance. The police investigations extended to another coastal area in the Buenos Aires province, as suspicions grew around certain police officers' roles in the case. Gustavo, initially a witness, gradually faded from his usual places of visit, eventually disappearing entirely. This development frustrated the Miramar community and deeply distressed Natalia's parents. They felt betrayed and couldn't comprehend how the prime suspect in their daughter's disappearance had managed to escape scrutiny. Days turned into weeks, and the official authorities remained tight-lipped, prompting the community to express their dissatisfaction. A series of protests erupted, demanding answers regarding Natalia's case. These demonstrations, attended by both locals and thousands of tourists, consistently called for Natalia's safe return, with around 8,000 people marching each night, vowing to stay on the streets until she was found. On February 8, 2001, a young woman was exploring the iconic sand dunes area of Miramar. While traversing the terrain, she made a grim discovery: the lifeless body of a girl, just 800 meters from where police had been conducting search operations. The girl's remains were in an advanced state of decomposition and partially covered by clothing. Visible signs of abuse and indications of forced intimacy were evident. A cord was found around her neck, suggesting strangulation. While it was presumed to be Natalia, local forensic authorities had to confirm her identity. Gustavo, Natalia's father, had been away, seeking tracking dogs to aid in the search for his daughter. He learned of the discovery through television news, and the shock and grief were nearly unbearable. Meanwhile, a local resident reported his attempts to search the area near the discovery, but was thwarted by the police. His suspicions of police misconduct deepened when he realized that the body had been found near the location where officers had barred his return to the area. The discovery of Natalia's body ignited public fury in Miramar, exacerbated by suspicions of police involvement. This anger escalated into violence, resulting in significant damage to the police station. The case's prominence compelled government authorities, including Minister of Security and the President of Argentina, to remove the initial lead investigator in Natalia's case from his duties. As more details emerge, it was revealed that Natalia's body had been found lying face up, bearing signs of severe brutality, including burns on various body parts and evidence of forced encounters with multiple individuals. Forensic analysis revealed genetic material from 5 different men, and her resistance was evident beneath her fingernails, indicating a fierce struggle. Authorities confirmed that Natalia had been held captive for several hours and that her pleas for release had been ignored. Following her death, it was presumed that her body had been kept in the same house where the events occurred for 4 days before being transported to the dunes, where it was ultimately discovered. Given the irregular conditions of the case and the alleged police cover-up reported by the family, it wasn't until September 2002 that the trial took place. 3 out of the 5 murder suspects, the police officers Ricardo Suarez, Oscar Echenique, and Ricardo Anselmini, were brought to trial, along with a 4th individual, Gustavo Fernandez, who was identified as the one responsible for handing Natalia over. In mid-October of the same year, the Second Criminal Oral Court of Mar del Plata established the guilt of the 3 individuals through skin, saliva, and pubic hair samples. Additionally, traces of soil found on Natalia's shoe were deemed consistent with the soil from the remote house, serving as evidence in the trial. The court sentenced the police officers Oscar Echenique, Ricardo Anselmini, and Ricardo Suarez to life imprisonment with additional penalties, considering them co-authors of the crimes of aggravated illegal deprivation of liberty, aggravated sexual abuse, and triple qualified homicide with cruelty, treachery, and in collusion with 2 or more persons. Gustavo El Gallo Fernandez was also sentenced to 25 years in prison. There was a law in effect during the time of Natalia's kidnapping and murder that led to further reductions in the sentences of those responsible for the teenager's homicide. They once again sought the benefits of temporary releases, and remarkably, their requests were granted once more, every 15 days, twice a month, and for 12 hours each time. Ricardo and Oscar could leave prison and return to their homes. During one of these instances, when he was free, Ricardo unexpectedly encountered Laura in a supermarket. Overwhelmed by anger, she shouted at him repeatedly, labeling him a murderer, but he simply responded with a smile. This incident shed light on the fact that the oversight of the measure granted to the former police officers was inadequate. The permission was intended for them to go to their residences, not to freely roam the city as if they had no pending legal matters. These glaring irregularities provided a strong argument for revoking their benefits. However, due to the difficulty in placing trust in the local courts, Gustavo, Natalia's father, resorted to a hunger strike in front of the Palace of Justice in Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina. This act of protest yielded results. In a case marred by irregularities, Gustavo managed to have his sentence reduced to 10 years. He was released in 2009, even though he was accused of another murder in Miramar. In June 2018, the trial of Ricardo, an active duty police officer with over 20 years of service, commenced. This officer had been under investigation since 2002, as he had been partially identified from the DNA samples taken during the investigations. However, he was later acquitted. He faced charges as a co-perpetrator of deprivation of liberty and legitimate freedom, along with the use of violence, aggravated sexual abuse with penetration, in collaboration with 2 or more individuals, and double aggravated homicide, committed to ensure the impunity of the co-perpetrators of a previous crime. He declared his innocence, despite the fact that the pubic hair found on Natalia's body matched his DNA by 97%. Tragically, not only was he acquitted, but he was also not expelled from the police force. The judges concluded that the accusation could not be substantiated. However, the verdict faced appeals from the prosecution and Natalia's family's legal representative. On November 13, 2019, the Buenos Aires Court of Appeals nullified that acquittal and ordered a new trial. In the meantime, the criminal defense attorney of 2 former police officers who were incarcerated declared to the media in early 2023. She asserted that her clients, Oscar and Ricardo Alfredo, meet the eligibility criteria for parole. During a hearing at the Mar del Plata Court of Appeals, she formally requested their early release. She also emphasized that the prison service reports have been favorable, highlighting that her clients have maintained impeccable behavior, with no records of infractions throughout their incarceration. From her perspective, they have already served the requisite time as mandated by the law. Once again, the parents of Natalia, ever watchful, attended the hearing and voiced their plea against the early release of the 2 former police officers convicted for their daughter's tragic fate. Fast forward to mid-May 2023, Ricardo, one of the police officers, aged 65, received a life sentence for his involvement in the abduction, sexual assault, and murder of Natalia Melman. Following the court's verdict, Laura expressed that the quest for justice continues, awaiting the identification and prosecution of the 5th individual involved. She made it resoundingly clear that her maternal determination knows no bounds and that the fight for justice will persist until all those responsible for Natalia's untimely demise are held accountable. The Natalia Melman case underscores the paramount importance of a trustworthy and impartial justice system, where individuals responsible for criminal acts, regardless of their background, face the legal consequences commensurate with their actions. The unwavering dedication of Natalia's parents played a pivotal role in ensuring that justice ultimately prevailed, preventing corruption and a lack of transparency within certain law enforcement circles from obstructing the pursuit of truth and accountability. Natalia's mother has reiterated again and again, "Our battles do not waver. While we cannot bring our daughter back to life, we must relentlessly pursue the 5th individual involved." It is through collective strength that we continue our pursuit of justice. Agustina Halbert was born on March 23, 1991, in the province of Buenos Aires, Argentina. She belonged to a well-known family and was the eldest of three daughters of the couple Carolina and Edgardo Halbert, who served as the Secretary of Health of their city. Her uncle, Herman Halbert, held the position of tourism minister and was a pre-candidate for deputy in the Rio Negro region. Consequently, the Halbert family was widely recognized in their province and other regions of Argentina. Those who knew Agustina since her childhood consistently praised her outstanding qualities. She was described as a sensitive, sincere, and loving child who had a passion for dogs and excelled in design, crafts, and decoration. Helen, who shared her adolescence with Agustina, observed her creative talent from a very young age. Helen recalled that when they were in school together, each class was assigned a theme, and Agustina always took the lead in decorating the classroom entrance with her impressive drawings and giant models. While her classmates were cutting and pasting, they followed Agustina's lead because they knew she was steps ahead, creating incredible models. Agustina also had a strong interest in fashion. She even designed the graduation sweaters for her high school class. Those close to her affectionately called her Agos and described her as sociable and an excellent hostess. She loved dressing up, and during her teenage years, her friends often gathered in the garage of her house for pre-dance parties. She would try to introduce her different groups of friends to each other, always striving to connect people. Agustina enjoyed baking and cooking, and she was skilled at it. She had a keen sense of taste and excelled in many things. She had a curious nature, and when something piqued her interest, she pursued it. After completing her secondary education, she initially enrolled in architecture, but later abandoned it. During that time, she focused her energy on fashion design and studied it for a while, but she ultimately changed her direction. Nevertheless, she was a successful young woman who used her knowledge to chase her dreams. She even started her own clothing brand, worked as a model, and was building her career. At some point in her adult life, Agustina's path crossed with Juan Manuel Rivera, with whom she began a relationship that seemed to be going well. Little is known about Juan Manuel's life, and even the names of his parents have not been disclosed. Only a text from an acquaintance referred to them as Moni and Mauricio, and other family details remain unknown. The only accessible information about Juan Manuel is his LinkedIn profile, where he is promoted as a software engineer, a graduate of the National Technological University in Argentina, although his listed place of residence was Toronto and its surroundings in Canada. Interestingly, a search in the university did not reveal him as a graduate. Instead, a resolution from the university's Superior Council in 2017 stated that he had not passed two subjects during the periods of 2008 and 2009, which led to him losing his status as a regular student in the field of information systems engineering. Agustina and Juan Manuel's relationship began during the pandemic and was characterized by ups and downs. According to some of her family members, he exhibited psychological violence towards her and was controlling. However, the situation escalated in the summer of 2021, marked by more serious conflicts and violence perpetrated by Juan Manuel against Agustina. Her father shared that she was deeply affected by the relationship, but with the support of her family, she rebuilt her life and had no contact with him for a whole year. Around September 2022, Agustina decided to move to Mexico, specifically to the picturesque beach town of Playa del Carmen in the Riviera Maya, to further her modeling career. She rented an apartment, leaving behind her comfort zone in her native Argentina and putting a considerable distance between herself and Juan Manuel. In Mexico, Agustina lived by doing advertising appearances as a hostess and engaging in modeling activities. She aspired to travel the world while pursuing her modeling career. She loved Playa del Carmen and was genuinely happy there. She found work quickly and was thriving. She had many friendships and the support of a childhood friend who was also living in the area, so Agustina was not alone. Furthermore, she brought her dog with her for emotional support. Agustina's passion for travel was evident in her social media posts. Brazil, New Zealand, China, and European capitals like Madrid, Paris, London, and Brussels were some of the destinations that Agustina had the pleasure of visiting and sharing with her 16,000 followers on Instagram. One of her future plans was to move to Europe. Candela, Agustina's 21-year-old sister, had come to spend the summer in Playa del Carmen. She wanted to enjoy the beautiful Mexican beach area and be close to her older sister. The two decided to share the apartment where Agustina lived because it had 2 rooms and they would be comfortable. At the end of December, Agustina's ex-boyfriend, Juan Manuel, reappeared. He came to visit her for the holidays. They reconciled, and he stayed to live with both girls. Candela would never have chosen to share an apartment with her sister's boyfriend, but things happened so quickly that before she realized it, the man was settled in Agustina's room. In her recent conversations with her family, Agustina admitted that they had decided to rekindle their relationship and announced that they planned to move to Spain. However, the peace in their relationship was always short-lived. On Thursday, February 16, there was a major argument because Agustina had discovered infidelity. The atmosphere in the apartment was extremely tense. On the afternoon of Friday, February 17, 2023, Candela left her sister alone with Juan Manuel. When she returned the next day at 7 in the morning, she tried to enter her sister's apartment, but the door was locked. She asked the building's doorman if there was any way to enter, and he informed her that screams and a fight had been heard in that apartment during the night. The police had been called twice due to the neighbors' complaints. Candela went back to the apartment and insisted on trying to get in. She entered the access code, but it didn't work. The door was locked from the inside, so she had to knock. After persisting several times, her sister's boyfriend finally got up and opened the door. Almost immediately, Juan Manuel asked Candela where Agustina was, and she criticized him, saying how could she know where her sister was if she had left the previous evening, leaving the couple alone. She insisted that he should know where Agustina was, but he replied that she was sleeping. While they argued, Agustina's small dog began barking, and Candela followed the sound to the bathroom of the apartment. There, she found Agustina with a bathrobe belt around her neck, tied to a hand towel holder that was only 4 feet high. Agustina's sister and her boyfriend untied her and brought her to the living room, where they attempted CPR, but Agustina was already dead. Candela then called the police, and the forensic experts examined the scene and took the body to the morgue, where an autopsy was performed, and she was immediately cremated. The case was initially classified as suicide, and it was considered closed. However, despite the decision of the Mexican justice system, the Halbert family suspected that Agustina's death was actually a murder committed by her boyfriend, and they had their reasons. In late February, Edgardo sent a letter to the Foreign Ministry. The letter that reached the office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs requested action from the competent authorities in Mexico and explained that the family had experienced a situation of helplessness regarding their daughter's death. He detailed that the judicial procedure was riddled with shortcomings because none of the basic protocols were applied to investigate the real causes of her death. The boyfriend was not detained, his phone was not confiscated, and no toxicological tests were conducted, nor were any injuries checked. In addition to all this, the family had no access to the case. Despite efforts by the Argentine consul to obtain copies of the proceedings, he was unsuccessful. Meanwhile, Edgardo recalled that the Foreign Ministry had an obligation to investigate and punish violence against women and to guarantee the family's right to clarification regarding the circumstances surrounding Agustina's death. Regarding this ongoing case, the Foreign Ministry's action is of utmost importance because, given the conditions of the investigation in Mexico, Juan Manuel is free to act. Since Agustina's death was classified as suicide, her partner's legal situation is not compromised at the moment, which is why he is not considered a fugitive, but a person of interest for the family. However, it is essential to bear in mind that both Agustina and Juan Manuel are Argentine citizens, and the Foreign Ministry must ensure the rights of both individuals, even if it is proven that the man committed the crime of which the family of the deceased influencer accuses him. On her part, Carolina, Agustina's mother, embarked on a crusade in the media to seek justice and put pressure on Mexican investigators. She denounced the violent relationship between the victim and her partner. Carolina asserted that her daughter was killed by her boyfriend, and she mentioned in a televised interview that her daughter had been tortured, burned, abused, and beaten, including blows to the head, all prior to her death. She was convinced that he had staged the supposed hanging from a towel rack. Agustina was a tall girl, and she was dressed and ready to go out when Candela found her. According to Carolina, nobody who is contemplating suicide takes the time to get dressed up. She recalled that Juan Manuel had a history of violence. During a press conference shared on social media, it was revealed that the couple had been dealing with ongoing issues that had been kept a secret. She mentioned that the man had never inspired trust, and 2 years earlier, they had rescued Agustina from the apartment she shared with Juan Manuel after a physical assault on her part. She stated that if they hadn't gone to rescue her that day, her daughter would have lost her life at that moment. After that violent incident, Agustina chose not to report it, and her parents decided to respect her decision, although they believed it was best not to let such incidents go unreported to the authorities. The consequences of not taking action at that time were felt 2 years later in Mexico. According to her mother's account, on Friday, February 17, Agustina sent a message at 2:30 p.m. saying that she felt ugly and believed that she did not deserve a man who would hurt her. Carolina provided support from afar and encouraged her to leave the apartment. She reminded her that there was no need to be with that man. She advised her to kick him out of the house and not even get upset about a person who wasn't worth it. In her opinion, her daughter, by returning to that violent man, had played a risky card, and it ended badly, to her regret. The model's uncle, Herman, stated that Juan Manuel's parents had contacted the family and promised to cooperate. However, the dialogue ended when the man did not show up for a Zoom meeting where he was supposed to share his version of the events. Regarding this absence, Carolina said that he had remained in hiding but was likely listening and watching everything to stay informed about the case. In her view, he would have given his version if he had nothing to hide. Angry and frustrated, she said that Juan Manuel's parents were responsible for covering up what she considered a monster. On March 8, International Women's Day, there were marches in Mexico and Argentina, demanding justice for Agustina. This increased pressure on the Mexican prosecutor's office, which announced that it would investigate the death of the Argentine model as a possible femicide. This decision was based on the autopsy report, which showed signs of head and facial injuries, multiple lacerations on the body, and bruises consistent with sexual abuse. A forensic expert hired by the Halbert family analyzed the official report and pointed out various signs of violence, such as punch marks on the mouth and a significant head injury. Additionally, the forensic expert noted lacerations in several parts of the body and internal and external hematomas, suggesting recent and non-consensual sexual activity. However, the only available evidence is this forensic report because, as mentioned earlier, the Mexican authorities proceeded to cremate Agustina's body shortly after classifying the case as suicide. Following the mobilizations on International Women's Day, the Mexican justice system announced that it had reclassified the case, originally labeled as suicide, and had begun investigating it as a possible femicide. The family's lawyer stated that the case had been referred to a special unit equipped to handle such cases. She further accused the main suspect, Juan Manuel, of attempting to stage a suicide and highlighted signs of violence at the scene. The apartment was locked from the inside. There were visible injuries on both the victim and her partner. A table leg was found out of place and on the floor, and 2 calls had been made to the police the previous night. She also criticized the judicial investigation, revealing that the crime scene had not been properly secured, contrary to protocol. It was essential for the scene and the victim's body to be preserved until the investigation concluded. She added that due to numerous errors, information that could have been obtained from the devices was lost since the perpetrator took the cell phones and all the data with him. The investigation into Agustina's violent death in Mexico promises to be a challenging journey for the family, which has been following the case from Argentina, more than 7,000 kilometers away, with a different legal system and culture. New statements were made by the prosecutor of the state of Quintana Roo on March 13, 2023, asserting that the Argentine model and influencer had taken her own life parishionment and scientifically. These declarations were made during a press conference held by the security cabinet of that Mexican province. The prosecutor detailed that there was a history of violence both before and during her relationship with her partner. He stated that it could not be ruled out that Juan Manuel might have induced her to take her own life, and that could be a matter of investigation. When questioned by journalists about the cigarette burns on the woman's body, he assured that these injuries occurred before her suicide. He explained that there had been violence the night before her death between her and her partner, and there was sufficient evidence of this. Regarding Juan Manuel, the prosecutor stated that he had been interviewed by the investigative police, and at that time, they did not have enough evidence for an arrest or any other legal action against him. However, this did not mean that he would not be pursued later if a connection to Agustina's death could be established. Edgardo, Agustina's father, insisted on the need to change the classification of the case, as their lawyer had found numerous pieces of evidence to classify it as femicide. When asked by an Argentine media about the prosecutor's statements, Herman, the victim's uncle, expressed that they were not surprised that the Attorney General was defending the suicide theory, because acknowledging that there were many elements suggesting femicide would mean admitting their failures. He believed that the prosecution had acted clumsily and hastily in the early stages of the investigation, leading to the loss of crucial evidence. However, as the case was transferred to the specialized unit, it indicated that something had gone wrong, as it is not common to replace a team that had performed well. He argued that the prosecutor was trying to defend the initial theory because going in a different direction would be an acknowledgement of their poor work. Gerardo Reynoso, a journalist, provided details of the judicial process. He explained that the Prosecutor General's office reclassified the death as femicide due to pressure from Agustina's family, the lawyer, and a feminist march on March 8th. However, in the subsequent hours, the justice system announced that they were still considering the suicide theory. He highlighted that, in general, the prosecutor's office did not want to validate the independent expert opinion that had found injuries compatible with femicide. Recognizing this would mean accepting that someone outside the prosecutor's office had solved a problem they should have handled with a properly executed expert analysis. Regarding Juan Manuel's situation, he pointed out that the prosecutor's office would have to call the boyfriend to discuss the case. In the event of her suicide, he would inevitably be part of the investigation, at least in the statements that should have been taken to determine what had happened. To make matters worse, the journalist emphasized that the crime was discovered on a weekend and during weekends in Mexico. Intern trainees and junior investigators typically handle duties. This could have been the reason why everything was mishandled. He believed that their actions were not malicious, but rather due to a lack of experience, and this was reflected in how the case was handled. Some days later, in Argentina, news surfaced about a call received by Agustina's father. A couple of days after the Women's Day March, a prosecutor from Quintana Roo contacted Edgardo by telephone on the instruction of the state prosecutor office, who wanted to speak with the family. Before hearing from the father, the person on the phone speaking on behalf of others whose identities were unclear, stated that the system wanted to apologize for what had happened. They emphasize that if Agustina's boyfriend bore any responsibility, they would certainly prosecute, as there was no intention within the prosecutor's office to cover up anything. They added that if any public servant from the prosecutor's office was found responsible, measures would be taken. He also quickly clarified that he would organize a meeting with the general prosecutor and a team of experts to show the father what they had. He stated that the general prosecutor had instructed that other state agencies in Mexico should also review the autopsy. Then the prosecutor, who had been speaking gently, abruptly shifted his tone and raised a complaint. He mentioned that it had been claimed that they did not follow the femicide protocol, and he argued that every death of a woman was worked on according to the femicide protocol. Edgardo also dropped the formality and transitioned from being a grieving father to one demanding justice for Agustina. After asking the prosecutor for his name, he directly addressed him as Carlos and firmly presented his point of view on the matter. He told him that if supposed experts found a young girl deceased in the situation she was in, hanging with a man inside the residence, and they didn't detain that man, didn't take his statement, and didn't seize his phone, then the investigation left much to be desired. He added that after reviewing the autopsy and witnessing what his daughter had endured, the conclusion for him was that everything had failed, a 100% failure, because his daughter had died. The latest information came at the end of March, just days before the 1-month anniversary of Agustina's death. The hypotheses of suicide and femicide are still being pursued on separate tracks. Halbert's lawyer said that the case had been transferred to the Women's Crimes Division, meaning Agustina's case is now on the femicide and gender violence table. She continued to work with the prosecutor handling the case and focused solely on demonstrating the femicide angle, providing more evidence, and investigating the boyfriend's involvement. She apologized for not being able to provide more details, but explained that all leads related to the murder were under seal. Regarding the question of when Juan Manuel could be arrested, the lawyer stated that it would depend on the conclusion of the investigation and that it was up to the prosecutor to determine if sufficient evidence had been provided or if more was needed. However, she reiterated her confidence in being able to prove everything. Neighbors reported hearing screams until around 2:30 in the morning. According to statements obtained after that time, silence prevailed at the scene. The time of death listed in the incomplete autopsy report is 4 a.m. While Agustina's family continues to demand justice, the alleged perpetrator is in an unknown location. Although the Mexican justice system has not issued an arrest warrant against him, and no judicial proceedings have been opened in Argentina because the alleged crime occurred in another country, he remains free. However, he has not made himself visible and has not faced the family of the girlfriend he supposedly loved and lived with until the day of her death. This case is still in development, but due to its preliminary stage, many proceedings are conducted discreetly and away from the media. The prosecutor's office investigating the alleged femicide issued a document to determine Reverter's whereabouts. The order was issued on June 7th by the Specialized Prosecutor's Office for the Investigation and Prosecution of Femicide to search for, locate, and request Reverter's presentation without depriving him of his freedom. As stated, the goal is to expand their interview to gather more information and comply with this authority's request. Molly Bish was born on August 2, 1983, in Warren, Massachusetts. She was the youngest of 3 children in the Bish family. With her siblings Heather and John Jr., Molly was a bright, responsible, and dearly loved and active girl. The Bish family originally hailed from Detroit, Michigan, but they moved to Massachusetts in search of a better future. The reason for their relocation was a disturbing crime that occurred in their Detroit neighborhood. A young woman had been kidnapped on her way home from work, and later found murdered. The Bish couple thought Warren would be a much safer place to raise their children, and this seemed to hold true for the next 15 years. Molly, always seeking new activities, had taken a summer job as a lifeguard at Cummins Pond in Warren. She was excited about this opportunity as it was her brother John Jr.'s former job, and he had requested that Molly be given the chance to continue in his place. Molly was fully committed to her job and wanted to perform it to the best of her ability to make her brother proud. On June 26, 2000, Magi accompanied Molly to the pond for her 7th day of work. When they arrived at the parking lot, Magi noticed a strange man. He was smoking a cigarette and sitting in a new white car. His presence made her uncomfortable. She looked at him, but he didn't acknowledge her. Magi accompanied Molly to her lifeguard station and stayed a little longer, hoping the man would be gone when she returned to the parking lot. However, when she got back to her vehicle, the stranger was still there. They locked eyes for several seconds, and fearing for Molly's safety, Magi waited inside her car for several minutes until the unknown man finally left. On June 27, 2000, Molly's 8th day on the job, she and her mother stopped at a local store just before 10 in the morning. Molly purchased everything she needed for her shift as a lifeguard. When they arrived at the isolated pond surrounded by mostly woods, Magi dropped off her daughter, who hurried to her station since she was running a bit late. Molly arrived a few minutes later at her station and quickly set up her chair, towel, and all her work equipment just after 10 in the morning. Swimming lessons were scheduled to begin soon, and she wanted everything in order to welcome the children. The beach was officially open, but Molly was alone, and it seemed that everyone was running late that day. No houses overlooked the water, and the beach wasn't visible from the road, which was located at the end of a dead-end street. In all directions, there were only trees. At 10 in the morning, Sandra and her children arrived to set up camp, followed by other families. They looked around for Molly but couldn't find her at her workstation. That morning, Molly hadn't used her police radio, which was part of her daily routine. Besides the open first aid kit, there was nothing to indicate that she had been engaged in any activities there. Even her shoes were neatly placed in front of her chair. When swimming lessons ended, one of the parents contacted Park Commissioner to report that Molly had disappeared, as it was uncharacteristic of her to leave her workstation unattended. The Park Commissioner arrived at the beach shortly after 11 in the morning, and at 11:44, he used his two-way radio to inform the police that the young girl had not shown up. He also examined her personal belongings left at the scene. From that point onward, some irregular events occurred that raised suspicions. At some point between noon and the afternoon, he ran into John Jr. at a hardware store, and for an unknown reason, he didn't mention that Molly had disappeared. Another irregularity was that the police didn't contact Molly's mother until 1 in the afternoon, 3 hours after Magi had dropped her off at her new job. Part of the reason for the delay, according to some accounts, was that people thought Molly might have gotten a ride to visit a friend, which was a logical assumption considering she had left her belongings by her workstation. Alarmed after receiving the call about her daughter's absence, the mother hurried to the location, where she found Molly's sandals, chair, first aid kit, radio, and lunch by the shore. However, there was no sign of her. Hours later, after the scene of the disappearance, and any potential evidence had been trampled by beachgoers, children, dogs, and curious onlookers who roamed freely, the police realized that their initial assessments might have been wrong. The first theory that Molly had simply gone off with friends made sense for an ordinary teenager, but not for someone as responsible as she was. So the second theory gained strength, suggesting that Molly had drowned in the pond. At that moment, it seemed the most plausible explanation. It's worth noting that Warren was the kind of small town where nothing much happened, and there were no records of violent crimes. With its picturesque houses and natural beauty, it seemed like a safe place to raise a family. In fact, That was the reason the Bish couple had moved there in the first place. Police investigation began with the basics, analyzing the teenager's belongings and work tools, and something chilling occurred. The unknown man became a suspect because all witnesses saw how he touched and examined everything within his reach upon arriving at the disappearance scene, without gloves or care. May J. informed officers that she had seen a mysterious man lurking around the pond in the days before. With this information, the county sheriff's office initiated an investigation. The local worker testified that he had seen the same man in the white sit-in, but he didn't see him in Molly's worksite parking lot. The car was parked near a nearby cemetery that was connected to the pond by a short path. On the morning of June 27, the day of Molly's disappearance, a truck was unloading sand for the beach. In the investigation, the truck driver was questioned, and he reported seeing the man parked in the lot a few minutes before Magi and Molly arrived. Police officers searched the pond and the surrounding woods but couldn't find Molly. Although there were no signs of a struggle at the scene, both the police and her family were convinced she had been abducted. The police focused their investigation on the unknown man in the white car, based on descriptions provided by Magi. And the two witnesses, a composite sketch of the man was created and circulated. He was described as a man with brown hair, dark eyes, and approximately 50 years old, possibly a heavy smoker since everyone who saw him mentioned he had a cigarette in hand. Simultaneously, a thorough investigation was launched, including the examination of local sex offenders to identify any matching the suspect's description, but no identification was made. The investigation into Molly's case became the largest and most costly search for a missing person ever conducted in the state of Massachusetts. The abduction gained significant notoriety and extensive media coverage. Following Molly's forced absence, her family created a website to spread awareness of the case to a broader audience. They also established an email chain to reach as many people as possible. Over 30,000 U.S. residents received emails about her disappearance. In 2001, Magi reached out to the renowned sketch artist, who agreed to create a composite sketch of Molly's abductor. The two met at a place, which are private accommodations in both rural and urban settings that offer bed and breakfast at rates lower than local hotels. They spent 9 hours chatting while they worked on the composite sketch. When it was completed, Magi felt it was accurate, except for one detail. She requested the artist to update the drawing to include a cigarette in the man's hand. The next day, when the artist showed her the updated result, Maggie was certain that the composite sketch was identical to the man she had seen. In May 2003, a hunter reported finding a blue swimsuit. He contacted the police because he had seen information about Molly's case and knew that she had been wearing a blue swimsuit when she disappeared. This lead turned out to be of great significance, and an intensive search in the forest began immediately. Tracking efforts, involving experts of various kinds, continued for several years. Finally, on June 9, 2003, Molly's body was discovered a little over 8 kilometers from her home. The official cause of death was not disclosed, but it was known that she had been murdered and buried in the dense vegetation on Whiskey Hill. The police continued their relentless efforts to find the person responsible, not just for the kidnapping, but for Molly's homicide. However, the case quickly went cold. In 2005, a man with a striking resemblance to the composite sketch was considered a suspect in an attempted kidnapping, but he couldn't be linked to Molly's case. In 2007, a registered sex offender was identified after attempting to abduct and assault a jogger just a few kilometers from Warren. He also matched the description of the suspect, but the police didn't press charges, and the reasons were never made public. In 2009, Rodney Stanger, who had recently been convicted of murder, became the prime suspect in Molly's abduction and murder. He had lived just a few kilometers from the town where Molly resided and moved to Florida shortly after her disappearance. Rodney also drove a white car, frequently fished at Commons Pond, and was an avid hunter in the area where Molly's body was found. He also fit the description that Molly's mother had provided to the police of the man she saw in a white sit-in. However, Rodney was never charged in the case as the police couldn't establish beyond a reasonable doubt that he was the perpetrator. After this significant setback, the case went cold once again. In November 2011, a confidential informant who had been providing information to the Special Operations Group became the new suspect. The individual identified as Gerald Battistoni attempted suicide while in prison after learning that he was considered a person of interest in Molly's case. Gerald also lived in the area where the teenager disappeared and had an extensive criminal record dating back to the 1980s. His DNA was analyzed in Texas, where he was serving his sentence, but the man passed away in November 2014 and was not charged with the crime. In June 2016, it was announced that enhanced DNA testing would be applied to 24 samples that had not yet been analyzed. A year later, in June 2017, investigators claimed to have found compelling information in the case. This information led them to a campground where the car allegedly used in Molly's abduction was supposedly buried. Multiple areas of interest were identified using ground-penetrating radar. The information was related to a new suspect who had lived at the campground around the time of Molly's abduction. At that time, he owned a white car similar to the one seen in the pond's parking lot. A witness stated that the man had told him something bad had happened and that he had been in the woods all night when Molly disappeared. He also reportedly had bloodshot scratches on his face. However, the man denied any involvement in the case, and it's unclear whether anything incriminating was found during the 2017 search. In 2019, new tests were conducted using more advanced technology in the hope of obtaining additional data to analyze the case's evidence. Investigators were hopeful that they could obtain a DNA profile with the new procedures, but the wheels of justice would once again turn slowly for Molly. On June 3, 2021, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early announced that Francis P. Sumner Sr. was a new person of interest in the case. According to reports at the time, it was not possible to arrest him because he had been found dead in his home 5 years earlier. However, the police received a verifiable lead that Francis was involved in Molly's disappearance. Because the investigation is still ongoing, authorities cannot provide many details about the case against Francis, but his criminal history is part of the reason he became a suspect. He had amassed a long list of crimes during his life and had served concurrent sentences for multiple abuses against women in the area where Molly worked. Police had received several tips about him over the years, and this time, the information given in the tips could be corroborated and verified. Francis had been convicted of kidnapping and raping a young woman who had gone to his auto repair shop in 1981. He was released on parole in 1998, just 2 years before Molly's disappearance. He lived not far from where Molly disappeared. He also resembled the composite sketch of the suspect. Unfortunately, he died in 2016 without facing charges in the case. Investigators continue to seek more information about him. When the existence of a new suspect was announced, the Bish family granted several interviews. Molly's older sister, Heather, told a media outlet that she believed investigators were doing everything possible with the information about the new suspect. As part of the effort to determine Francis's involvement, the police went to Ohio to obtain a DNA sample from his son, who was serving a federal prison sentence. This would enable them to conduct DNA analysis to establish a match with the deceased offender. Heather stated that someone like Francis, a convicted sex offender and rapist, should have been on the sex offender registry. This would have allowed them to approach him in the early stages of the investigation, and perhaps the case could have been closed with less trauma for everyone involved. In the same interview, Molly's sister pointed out that the conclusion of the investigation, which has spanned decades, would bring peace to her family. While they will always miss Molly, at least they won't have to keep trying to figure out who was responsible for her absence. Molly Bish's disappearance sparked the largest search for a missing person in the history of the state of Massachusetts. As of 2023, the case remains unresolved. The family believes they are nearing the end of the search for the culprit, although they are also aware that there is a very high likelihood that there may never be complete closure. Her killer has not yet been apprehended, but the case remains open, and the investigation is ongoing. A reward of $100,000 is still being offered for information leading to a definitive resolution. Molly's disappearance has turned her parents into staunch advocates for child safety. They hope that through their efforts, they can prevent other children from becoming victims of predators. This horrible case took place in Lausada, a village situated in the northern region of Portugal, a location known for its vineyards, renowned green wine, and its distinction as the youngest population in the country. Nestled in the heart of the municipality bearing the same name, this village is in close proximity to the northwest coast of Portugal, a hub of summer enjoyment for tourists hailing from various corners of Europe. Within this quaint village, on January 28, 1987, Rui Pedro Teixeira was born. His parents, Filomena and Manuel, lauded his lively and jovial nature, along with his remarkable creativity and imagination. In a nutshell, this family, complete with their youngest daughter Karina, led a harmonious and contented life. Rui Pedro was a bundle of energy as a child. After completing his daily school assignments, he engaged in spirited soccer matches with his beloved cousin João Andre and other local children. His aspiration was to become a professional goalkeeper, and thus he consistently played in that role. Among the boys' other pastimes was cycling, and he could often be spotted zipping through the village to ensure he reached his daily math tutoring sessions punctually. However, one shadow cast over his otherwise serene childhood. Rui Pedro grappled with epilepsy. Manuel and Filomena were the proprietors of a driving school. One day, an ordinary young man named Afonso Dias arrived at the academy with aspirations of obtaining his driver's license. Filomena swiftly discovered that Afonso was facing financial hardship. Renowned for her exceptional empathy, she immediately sought ways to assist him. Initially, she provided him with clothing, and as their bond deepened, she extended the opportunity for him to work at the school, enabling him to earn extra income. 3 years passed, and thanks to Filomena's kindness, Afonso became a truck driver at just 22 years old. The family trusted Afonso so much that they relied on him to pick up Rui Pedro and Karina from school and bring them back home. To do this, Afonso used his brother's car, a Fiat Uno. As they spent time together every day, an unusual friendship blossomed between Afonso and Rui Pedro. The family didn't think it was strange, especially because Afonso had a youthful and childlike personality, which made him and Rui Pedro feel like brothers. However, the maternal grandparents viewed their relationship with suspicion. Manuel, on the other hand, was concerned about Afonso smoking around the child and considered him a bad influence. Worried about the consequences of this friendship, Manuel talked to Filomena about it, but she was convinced of Afonso's good character and believed he meant no harm. In the end, like in any good marriage, they reached a compromise, with Filomena agreeing to keep an eye on their interactions. On March 4, 1998, around 2 p.m., Rui Pedro rode his bicycle to his mother's workplace, which was just a few blocks away from home, to tell her that Afonso had invited him for a ride in his brother's car. Filomena wasn't happy about the idea and told him not to go. Instead, she sent him to a nearby field where his friends were waiting to play soccer, emphasizing the importance of making it to his 5 p.m. class on time. Though he was initially disappointed, Rui Pedro obeyed. He removed his bicycle helmet and headed to the soccer field. When he arrived, he found his friends, except for João Andre, whom his mother didn't allow to go out. Surprisingly, a black Fiat Uno driven by Afonso pulled into the field a few minutes later and stopped beside Rui Pedro. They had a short conversation, and then the child put aside his bicycle helmet, got into the car, and bid farewell to his friends through the passenger window with a simple gesture. Between 5 and 6 in the afternoon, a phone call shattered the family's peace and marked the start of the Teixeira family's worst days. Rui Pedro's tutor called to inform them that the boy hadn't attended his class. This was highly unusual since Rui Pedro had never missed a class before. Panic set in as his parents feared that an unexpected epileptic seizure might have rendered him unconscious, potentially causing severe brain damage if he didn't receive prompt attention. The news quickly spread throughout the village, and concerned residents sprang into action. They organized small search teams to cover the entire town. Soon, they found their first clue. A neighbor reported that around 3 p.m., he had spotted Rui Pedro's bicycle hidden among the bushes near the soccer field where he had been playing. Manuel and Filomena knew their son very well. They understood that his bicycle meant the world to him, and he wouldn't just leave it behind without a good reason. This led them to believe that Rui Pedro might have been taken against his will. Without hesitation, they rushed to the police station to report his disappearance. Upon receiving the report, the police launched their investigation by questioning the 3 boys who had been playing soccer with Rui Pedro. These friends recounted how a black car had entered the field to pick up their friend, identifying Afonso as the driver. They emphasized that Afonso's behavior had been strange and controlling toward their young companion. Initially, the officers doubted the children's accounts and chose to disregard their statements. However, they mentioned the misleading lead to the mother, which raised her suspicions. Filomena then mentioned Rui Pedro's request from that same afternoon to meet up with his friend. Immediately, everyone's attention turned to the truck driver, and the authorities proceeded to search his home. Afonso welcomed the officers who wanted to ask him some routine questions. As the last person who had seen the child, his statement could provide crucial information. However, the truck driver remained unusually calm and claimed not to have seen Rui Pedro. His reaction raised suspicion among the agents, given the numerous testimonies they had collected. Consequently, he was taken to the police station for further questioning. Once at the precinct, Afonso attempted to offer an excuse. He mentioned that his brother had asked him to take the car for its annual inspection, a mandatory requirement in Portugal for vehicles over 8 years old. However, records showed that he had never attended the scheduled appointment for that afternoon. Afonso persisted with his story, continuing to deny that the child had gotten into the car hours earlier. He admitted to a brief encounter of only 5 minutes with Rui Pedro before 2 p.m. Afterward, he claimed to have driven to a nearby town, which was about 15 kilometers from Lausada, and parked in front of a pharmacy. Afonso asserted that he stayed in the car for a while before deciding to take a stroll through the city, even mentioning that he admired the shop windows. When he grew tired, he drove to his girlfriend's house, arriving at 6:45 p.m. The woman lived in another village in the region, just 11 minutes away from Lausada. Meanwhile, at the police station reception, Rui Pedro's grandfather and cousin anxiously waited, determined to apply pressure to expedite the investigations. When Afonso's interrogation concluded, the 2 of them crossed paths with the suspect in the hallways. Upon seeing him, the grandfather desperately inquired about his grandson's whereabouts and offered anything in exchange for an answer. Afonso broke down in tears and insisted that he didn't know where the child was, but he warned that if they wanted to find him, it was essential to close all borders because he had probably been kidnapped and was on his way to a foreign country. The cousin also confronted Afonso and even mentioned a conversation they had with Rui Pedro the day before. The man's only response was to shout at the boy to be quiet once and for all, but the cousin remained unfazed. On the contrary, he continued the narrative with more details. Afonso had offered to take both of them to meet prostitutes and said that the meeting point would be a vacant lot. Following these events, a large-scale police investigation was launched in the region, involving local residents, firefighters, and even the assistance of bloodhounds to find the trail of the lost child. The officers believed that the boy might have had a seizure and was unconscious somewhere in the village. Or maybe he had simply wandered far away and couldn't find his way back. In summary, they considered it a case of a search and rescue, ruling out the hypothesis of kidnapping. Rui Pedro's family was outraged by this approach to the case. Due to the extensive dissemination of Rui Pedro's images in the local media, a sex worker recognized his face and contacted the local police. She stated without hesitation that on March 4, 1998, a black car had stopped in front of her on a desolate road. The driver offered her $10 to have sex with the little boy who accompanied him. She asked how old the boy was, and the man replied that he was old enough. The woman took him behind some bushes by the side of the road and looked for a private place where no one could see them. There was no sexual contact. The little boy was very terrified, crying nonstop and repeating over and over again that he wanted to leave. Seeing the child in such a distraught state, the sex worker couldn't help but feel compassion for him. She spent around 15 minutes trying to comfort him. She hugged him tightly and assured him that everything would eventually be all right. Amidst his sobs, he confided in her that he had been forced to attend that meeting. After emerging from the bushes, the child got into the car, and that was the last time she saw him. All signs pointed to a kidnapping, but even with this compelling witness statement, the police still hesitated to fully embrace this theory. In a desperate plea, the family begged the authorities to act urgently, stressing that each passing moment could be critical to the child's survival. The following morning, just after the court's opening, Begg managed to persuade the public prosecutor's office to request the intervention of the Judicial Police, a specialized agency responsible for investigating serious crimes like homicides, kidnappings, organized crime, and terrorism. Within 24 hours of Rui Pedro's last sighting, several judicial police officers arrived in the town. In the subsequent days, alongside family members and neighbors, they meticulously combed through the entire region, suspecting that Rui Pedro might have been left somewhere. The distribution of posters featuring the child's photograph escalated, reaching a national level, and the entire country of Portugal was deeply shaken by the case. The disappearance of the child sparked an overwhelming sense of collective sorrow. People referred to Rui Pedro as our boy or our little Pedro. Simultaneously, the family began receiving a barrage of phone calls, many of which were tormenting and distressing. Some claimed to have Rui Pedro in their custody, while others provided leads to his whereabouts that ultimately led nowhere. The most audacious callers even demanded a ransom payment. One particular and terrifying call featured a child whose voice sounded eerily similar to Rui Pedro's. Amidst screams and tears, he desperately called out for his mother. Citing the challenge of tracing all communications, the police decided not to pursue any leads that came through phone calls. The family's desperation grew, and the omission of potentially valuable information for the ongoing investigation appeared both inept and negligent. In April 1998, 1 month after the disappearance, a suspicion emerged. A renowned Portuguese journalist traveled to Disneyland in Paris with his wife and children for a report intended to be published in a widely read magazine with national circulation in Portugal. The article featured a series of portraits of him and his family at various park attractions. Among these images, one particular photograph raised alarm bells. In the background, a small child could be seen with a man dressed in red. Filomena and Manuel saw the photograph and firmly asserted that it was Rui Pedro. In September of the same year, a significant breakthrough occurred as the British police dismantled a pedophile network in an operation known as Operation Cathedral. This organization primarily operated online and served as a database with thousands of photos and videos depicting sexually abused children. This operation gained high-profile attention due to the unusually large amount of pornographic content possessed, produced, and distributed by this organization's members. Shockingly, they discovered more than 750,000 photos and 1,800 videos. Out of the 1,263 individuals featured in the seized material, only 17 were identified. 1 from Argentina, 1 from Chile, 1 from Portugal, 6 from the UK, and 7 from the United States. Filomena confirmed that Rui Pedro appeared in some of those photos, confirming that he was still alive, but nothing more. There were no coordinates or leads to his possible location. The British police speculated that members of the network had abused him on camera and then potentially harmed him. Over the next 13 years, the Public Ministry of Portugal built a case against Afonso, who consistently maintained his innocence. The trial began in November 2011. The key testimonies came from Rui Pedro's 3 friends, forming the backbone of the case. While the judge could verify certain facts presented by the prosecution, the court dismissed several testimonies due to a lack of conclusive evidence. In March 2012, Afonso was acquitted. On Rui Pedro's 27th birthday, January 28, 2014, a video was published that quickly went viral on social media. Some actors voluntarily participated in this video campaign. Their aim was to search for new clues about Rui Pedro's whereabouts, while also including the email addresses of the Northern Board of Judicial Police and the Portuguese Association for Missing Children to ensure that the young man's case would not fade into obscurity. This campaign had a broader goal of denouncing child trafficking for sexual exploitation. Returning to the legal proceedings, Afonso's freedom was short-lived. After an appeal by Rui Pedro's family in 2014, a new ruling from the Porto Court of Appeals sentenced him to 3 years in prison. This sentence was for inciting a minor to engage in involuntary sexual relations, but it was not related to the kidnapping or any other charges linked to the disappearance itself. Despite Afonso's defense attorney filing an appeal, this second ruling was confirmed by the Portuguese Supreme Court. On October 3, 2014, the resolution was ratified, and on March 18, 2015, Afonso was taken into custody after the police issued an arrest warrant. He was released on parole in March 2017, having served only 2/3 of his sentence. Afonso continued to maintain his innocence, claiming to be the victim of a grave injustice. 20 years after the disappearance in 2019, Rui Pedro was officially declared presumed dead. The police concluded their search as no further leads had emerged since Operation Cathedral, and the case had gone cold. The young man's whereabouts remain a painful mystery. Despite the ceaseless pain and the enduring void of not knowing what happened to her son, Filomena did not give up. In 2007, she founded the Association of Relatives of Missing Children. Rui Pedro's case highlighted a grave issue. We are confronted with a deeply serious phenomenon. Every year, 3 million children are kidnapped worldwide. In Portugal alone, there are over 60 missing children and minors. Maria Cash, the sole daughter in a family of 4 siblings, was a resident of the Barracas neighborhood in Buenos Aires. She was born on December 5, 1981, and enjoyed a blissful childhood with her parents, Federico and Maria del Carmen, along with her brothers Maximo, Patricio, and Santiago. From a tender age, she grasped the significance of friendship when she crossed paths with a girl named Carolina at the age of 6, forging a bond that would endure a lifetime. Subsequently, during their 3rd year of high school, Maria and her best friend Carolina welcomed another addition to their circle, Mariana, who seamlessly became an inseparable part of their group. Maria's social circle was characterized by its quality rather than quantity. Although she maintained amicable relations with her family, she bore the reputation of a rather solitary individual. Even when surrounded by people, she possessed the unique ability to disconnect and revel in solitude. As she matured and gained more independence, whenever she yearned for solitude, she would simply decide to retreat in a coastal city in Argentina known for its pristine beaches, distinctive architectural beauty, and abundant pine forests. Upon arriving, she routinely switched off her cell phone, leaving her friends and family without news of her for several days. Maria developed her talents as a designer and took charge of selling the clothing she crafted. Additionally, she was involved in the sales and promotion of various products. In contrast to her preference for solitude and moments of introspection, Maria displayed a warm and courteous demeanor towards others. Acquaintances frequently remarked on her perpetual smile and serene countenance, making her a delightful presence to be around. Her lively and energetic nature added to her charm. Carolina and Mariana portrayed her as a free spirit with a deep affinity for nature. They emphasized that she lived a modest existence, but consistently extended invitations to dine with her friends and never forgot to mark their birthdays, even if it meant gifting them with a handmade flower. Nevertheless, Carolina also noted Maria's enigmatic side. At some point during her youth, Maria joined a spiritual group, a religious movement centered on self-realization. This pursuit resonated deeply with her, as it provided a platform for meditation exercises aimed at achieving inner peace. While seemingly incongruous to outsiders, this spiritual practice held profound meaning for her, accentuating her inherently spiritual and tranquil disposition. Maria's involvement in the group, along with the enigmatic inner circle she cultivated within the group, remained shrouded in secrecy from her friends and family. Despite its fundamental role in her life, she limited her disclosures to the fact that she dedicated extensive hours to meditation in pursuit of self-awareness. It was within the realms of this group that Maria crossed paths with Juan Pablo, a teacher, proprietor of a restaurant, and government employee in Jujuy. He resided at the picturesque town located 13 kilometers to the north of San Salvador de Jujuy. Over time, Juan Pablo and Maria's friendship deepened to a point where their closeness sparked speculations among both acquaintances and family members. Mariana and Carolina recalled Maria's glowing remarks about him. In late June 2011, Maria confided in her friends, expressing her desire to journey to Jujuy to promote her products, a decision that raised eyebrows, considering the considerable distance and geographical separation from the capital. Maria meticulously orchestrated her trip to Jujuy, veiling the true purpose from everyone, or at least weaving 3 different narratives. She casually mentioned her intention to rest, to sell some of her handmade garments, and even claimed that a friend had extended a job offer at a bar in Jujuy. During a phone call in the presence of her friends, she cryptically mentioned a job opportunity from a Jujuy-based friend without divulging further details. She outlined her plans to depart in July and return to Buenos Aires by December. In the days preceding her journey, Maria convened with her friends for a dinner gathering at Mariana's residence. That night, she shared an overwhelming desire to spread the love of God among people. She carried a Bible brimming with highlighted passages, marking a newfound religiosity, as per Mariana's recollection. In reference to her voyage to Jujuy, Federico Cash, her father, explained that she sought serenity and opted for a destination devoid of the chaos of the capital. She had informed him about a job offer at a friend's bar. On July 4, Maria commenced her journey and at 7:30 p.m. left her home, packing minimally, indicating her intention to be away for just a few days. Her father, Federico, accompanied her to the bus terminal, where she was set to board a bus destined for San Salvador de Jujuy, scheduled to arrive around 6 p.m. the following day. Little did he know that it would be the last time he saw her alive. Somewhere along the journey, an event occurred that remains shrouded in ambiguity to this day, lacking clarity in its entirety. What is unequivocal is that on July 5, Maria made an unexpected decision to disembark in Rosario de la Frontera, a town situated in the province of Salta. This deviation from the plan caught everyone by surprise. In subsequent communications with her family and her friend Juan Pablo, she vaguely alluded to her discomfort with certain fellow passengers, citing an unpleasant experience during the bus ride. However, she refrained from disclosing the true nature of the situation. Standing by the roadside, Maria resorted to hitchhiking and ventured southward until she reached Santiago del Estero. None of these detours aligned with her original itinerary. Nevertheless, after reconnecting with her friend Juan Pablo and disclosing her financial predicament, she resolved to resume her journey. He generously offered to purchase her a bus ticket online, enabling her to continue her voyage to Jujuy. Maria eventually arrived in Jujuy in the early hours of Wednesday, July 6. During her stay there, she contacted Juan Pablo from a local mechanic's workshop where she had borrowed a phone. Juan Pablo's sister answered the call, informing her that he was occupied with work and couldn't personally pick her up. Instead, she suggested taking a taxi with the assurance that they would cover the fare upon her arrival. Subsequently, all communication with Maria ceased. When Juan Pablo returned home, he found her absent. At approximately 4:30 a.m., he sent her numerous messages, urging her to either visit her grandmother's house or one of his own restaurants. He provided detailed addresses and insisted on covering the taxi fare, but received neither a response nor her arrival. Around 2 p.m., the young woman was spotted once more, attempting to hitchhike along Route 34. During that afternoon, she conversed with her family, revealing that she had depleted her funds and was feeling unwell, yet she refrained from divulging further details. On the night of July 6, she was captured on video passing through a toll booth. Notably, she was without her suitcase but carried a backpack. Remarkably, the same backpack seen in the footage was discovered by toll booth employees who chose to retain it and eventually handed it over to the police several days later. According to some accounts of the case, on July 7, Maria sought medical attention at a hospital in Salta. However, as the medical examination was about to commence, she opted to depart. Witnesses attested to her appearing disoriented and erratic, as if she lacked a clear sense of direction or purpose. Her overall appearance was somewhat disheveled. Nevertheless, she did manage to consult a pulmonologist in downtown San Salvador de Jujuy. He charged her 100 pesos for the consultation and prescribed medication for a respiratory issue. In contrast to the descriptions provided by those who encountered her at the hospital, the pulmonologist asserted that she exhibited perfect lucidity, cleanliness, and neatness. These conflicting reports presented a perplexing challenge for investigators. On the same day, July 7, she embarked on a journey to Salta. A truck driver who had previously seen her in Pampa Blanca, Jujuy, confirmed encountering her while walking along a street in downtown Salta. Another woman also observed her in the vicinity, seemingly in search of a craft store that included a gym on its upper floor. Around 5 p.m., from an internet cafe in that city, Maria sent an email to her brothers, requesting their phone numbers. In the email, she expressed her desire to return to Buenos Aires, citing the loss of her belongings. Regrettably, the communication abruptly terminated, instilling concern within her family. Consequently, they promptly made the decision to report her disappearance, filing a formal complaint at a police station in Salta. Fearing the worst, her father and one of her brothers opted to embark on a car journey to Jujuy. Nonetheless, their efforts to locate her proved futile, as she had already moved on from the area. It appears that on July 8th, Maria engaged in an unexpected encounter at the toll booth. She boarded a van driven by a producer and former councilman from the Salta locality. He transported her to the roundabout, where Maria once again solicited a new ride. This time, she succeeded in securing a ride from a truck driver heading to Route 34. Witnesses who encountered her in that vicinity attested to her appearing bewildered and disoriented. She disembarked at a religious pilgrimage site and was spotted in the vicinity of the sanctuary at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Following this moment, all trace of her vanished. Right from the outset, Maria's family pointed out numerous shortcomings in the investigation. For an initial period of 8 months, the case was categorized as a mere disappearance, with the Salta judicial system overseeing the inquiry. However, in early 2012, Maria's father lodged a report suggesting the possibility of human trafficking. Consequently, The case and its investigation were transferred to the federal prosecutor's office in Salta. The investigation proved to be an intricate puzzle due to the abundance of false leads, some motivated by ill intent and others stemming from genuine concern. Furthermore, Maria's physical description was rather commonplace. A young woman of slender build, average height, with dark hair and eyes. These particulars aligned with the characteristics of countless individuals, resulting in a deluge of incoming calls that ultimately led the investigation astray, as these leads failed to yield any substantive progress. One of the most perplexing aspects that impeded the search was the uncertainty surrounding Maria's intended destination. She underwent 3 transfers across different provinces, introducing an additional layer of complexity. A multitude of lineups, extensive interrogations, consultations, and inspections were conducted, all to no avail. Additionally, 2 extensive search operations were carried out in the region and along Route 34 in an endeavor to eliminate the possibility that she had ventured into the wilderness to spend the night or, alternatively, had fallen victim to a crime along the highway. Speculation even arose that she might have boarded another bus and journeyed to a different region of the country. As the months elapsed, the hypothesis of human trafficking began to wane. Maria's age did not conform to the typical profile sought by human traffickers, who typically target adolescents or significantly younger women. Nevertheless, it was never entirely dismissed, with investigators pivoting their focus toward the potential occurrence of a psychotic episode. Remarkably, in the testimony provided, Maria was portrayed as being poorly dressed, disheveled, and seemingly adrift. She embarked on and disembarked from buses, engaged in hitchhiking, and had even misplaced her identification documents. Contradictorily, Juan Pablo, one of the last individuals to converse with her, recounted that during their telephone exchanges, she exhibited a sense of normalcy, offering no indication of being disconnected from reality or under the influence of substances. There was no discernible sense of fear or urgency in her voice, nor did it seem like she was evading anyone. He emphasized that their conversation flowed like any ordinary exchange between friends. However, he did acknowledge 2 aspects that struck him: her admission of having no money and her decision to head to Jujuy without confirming his presence there. He described Maria as an exceptional person, noting that he had never known her to grapple with substance dependencies. He expressed astonishment at her sudden visit to Jujuy because they had lost touch for a considerable period, and out of the blue, she called to inform him of her presence there. Simultaneously with the official investigation, Maria's family pursued their search independently. They frequently voiced their frustration with the sluggish pace of the police investigation and the lack of tangible progress. After her disappearance, they engaged in conversations with numerous truck drivers, shopkeepers, neighbors, and law enforcement officers. Across these cities, they disseminated flyers bearing her photograph and contact information for individuals who might possess pertinent information. It was reported that they gathered more than 4,000 leads, yet the overwhelming majority proved to be either false or malicious. Maria's friend, Juan Pablo, also conducted his own inquiries. They combed through police stations, private clinics, public hospitals, and forensic facilities. The police conducted extensive searches and explored numerous theories, yet with time, most of these leads were discounted. Maria's friends even contemplated the possibility that she might have experienced a psychological episode during which she lost self-recognition, track of time, or fell victim to drugging followed by abduction. Nonetheless, these notions remained firmly within the realm of conjecture due to the absence of concrete evidence. Within this context, it is noteworthy that the relentless search conducted by the Cash family did not go unrewarded. While it did not yield Maria's whereabouts, it did lead to the discovery of other women who had fallen prey to criminal organizations engaged in human trafficking. These women had been ensnared in various locations and were ultimately rescued, thanks to the Cash family's endeavors in sharing their stories with the authorities. Amidst this unyielding pursuit, tragedy befell the family once more. In 2014, during one of their numerous journeys across the country in pursuit of any trace or lead, Maria's father tragically lost his life in a traffic accident in La Pampa. He had ventured there to distribute flyers bearing his daughter's visage. Several weeks following his passing, his wife received a phone call that rekindled her determination, faith, and optimism to continue the fight. Pope Francis extended his condolences for her husband's demise, expressing his heartfelt sorrow. In response, she wrote a letter of gratitude, wherein she conveyed how the Holy Father's compassionate words had filled her heart with love and rekindled the faith and hope that had dwindled from her life nearly 3 years earlier, alongside the disappearance of her daughter. Following Maria's father's tragic passing, his children persisted in their quest to locate Maria. Yet, as is often the case in disappearance investigations, they appeared trapped in a labyrinth, devoid of new leads to guide them. Then, in 2018, a significant development emerged when human remains, including a skull, were discovered in the Bolivian city of Oruro. There was hope that these remains might provide answers about the fate of the young designer, and this possibility garnered extensive media coverage. However, subsequent DNA analysis conclusively ruled out any connection to Maria. The Salta judiciary confirmed that the DNA extracted from the recovered remains did not match that of the Cash family, whose samples had been collected in Salta. Consequently, the mystery surrounding Maria's disappearance persisted, much like it did at the outset of the investigation. In that same year, 2018, a woman named Julia came forward, alleging physical abuse and cruel treatment, and implicating her ex-husband, a prison guard, in Maria's disappearance. She claimed to have witnessed Maria alive and held captive within a human trafficking network, at least until 2013, 2 years after her initial disappearance. Julia's attorney stated that, according to his client's testimony, these women were confined in a piece of land with rented infrastructure. While this lead was diligently pursued, it too failed to yield the discovery of Maria. The subsequent year, in September 2019, as part of this renewed investigative approach, search operations were conducted in an area known as Las Palomitas in Salta, based on information provided by an anonymous witness. Regrettably, these searches produced no results that could advance the investigation. In November 2020, forensic experts released an updated image of Maria Cash, employing age progression techniques. The intention behind this effort was to assist in her potential identification and to prompt new leads. Maria's family expressed hope that this initiative would yield fruitful results. However, once more, these endeavors proved unfruitful. In a succinct recapitulation of the case's progression in 2023, certain Argentine media outlets revisited the topic of Maria's disappearance. They underscored that during the early years of the search, numerous leads were pursued and a plethora of hypotheses were formulated. However, as time passed, these trails gradually dissipated and the prospects of locating her dwindled. Nonetheless, the authorities remained steadfast in asserting that the search had never been abandoned. Francisco Benitez, known as Paco, entered the world on December 13, 1963, in Algeciras, a city in Spain. Growing up alongside his 2 brothers and 1 sister, he spent his childhood in a town bordering Morocco. Paco received his education at a Catholic boarding school. When he turned 20, he made a significant move to Seville, where his parents, including his mother, whose occupation remains unknown, and his father, a retired nursing assistant, had settled. In 1986, Paco embarked on a new journey by enlisting in the French Foreign Legion, a branch of the French military with a storied history dating back to 1831. During his service, Paco was assigned to various missions, including deployments to the Persian Gulf and Gabon, where he demonstrated his dedication and valor. In recognition of his service, he was honored with the Cross of War and the Military Medal. In 1988, while stationed at Marseille, Paco's path crossed with Marie-José, or Maria-José, as he called her, a French woman working in bars near the port he frequented. Maria-José was a single mother raising 4 children, each from a different father. Paco and Maria-José began dating and soon decided to move in together. Over time, their family expanded, and on May 24, 1994, Maria-José and Paco welcomed their first child together, Allison, who became Paco's cherished firstborn daughter. Paco was known for his deep love and protective nature as a father, although he also had a history of infidelity. Around 1998, Paco embarked on a tumultuous relationship with Simone de Oliveira Alves, a young woman of Brazilian origin with 4 children. He met Simone in a club, and for some years he led a double life with her until their relationship ultimately came to an end in late 2004. Despite Maria-José's discovery of Paco's infidelity, she chose to forgive him. More than a decade after Allison's birth, Maria-José and Paco decided to formalize their relationship through marriage. Their wedding took place on November 10, 2006. This event marked the occasion when Maria-José adopted her husband's last name, and they both endeavored to build a harmonious and contented life together. In 2010, Paco experienced another relocation, this time to the recruitment area of the French Foreign Legion in Perpignan, a city situated in southern France. As of December 2012, troubles began to emerge within the couple's relationship, culminating in their separation. Maria-José initiated divorce proceedings, driven by a discovery made by their daughter during the Christmas of 2012. It was during this time that Allison stumbled upon messages of affection exchanged between her father and a new romantic interest named Dolores, a fellow soldier stationed in Perpignan. Learning of Paco's continued infidelity, Maria-José confronted him, no longer willing to tolerate his unfaithfulness, which ultimately led to his departure from their home. Despite the challenges in his marriage, Paco continued to engage in romantic pursuits. He parted ways with Dolores when she sought a more committed relationship, and he subsequently commenced a new affair with a familiar face, compatriot Maria Teresa, who worked as a guard at the French consulate in Barcelona. Meanwhile, as her mother navigated the complexities of divorce proceedings, Allison sought to lead a typical life for a young person her age. At 19, she secured employment at a hair salon and nurtured her interests in modeling and beauty pageants, passions that had taken root in her early years. Allison's educational achievements, kindness, and natural beauty had earned her a coveted spot in a beauty competition scheduled for August 11, 2013. Winning this competition would have opened doors for her, guaranteeing participation in Miss France 2014 and bringing her one step closer to realizing her dream of being crowned the most beautiful woman in her country. However, on July 14, 2013, while the French were celebrating their national holiday, a preparatory meeting for the contestants took place. Surprisingly, Allison did not attend this crucial meeting, causing surprise among her fellow contestants and organizers. From that day onwards, neither she nor her mother were heard from again. According to Paco's account, on Sunday the 14th, he had driven his daughter to the pre-contest meeting. Subsequently, he returned to their family home, where he found himself embroiled in an argument with Maria-José over an electricity bill. Paco stated that he later went back to pick up Allison, and they both returned to their city of residence. Upon their arrival, he discovered that Maria-José had packed her bags, seemingly preparing to leave the house with her younger daughter, heading towards Toulouse. This was the story Paco shared with anyone seeking news of Allison and Maria-José. A text message sent from Maria-José's phone at 5:17 p.m. on that Sunday seemed to corroborate this account. In the message, she informed her eldest daughter, Lydia, that they were going to Toulouse. She found this decision reasonable, given that her sister aspired to work for a renowned cosmetics manufacturer, and Maria Jose was also in search of employment in that town. Unfortunately, this was the last communication received from them. Allison was known for her active presence on social media, but on July 14, shortly before 5 p.m., her Facebook account went silent. Concern began to grow among those closest to her, especially considering her consistent online activity. After multiple unsuccessful attempts to contact them, a family friend eventually reported their disappearance to the police. Initially, authorities argued that since both Maria Jose and Allison were adults, they had the freedom to travel without notifying anyone. However, the pressure from concerned family members eventually led Paco to make the difficult decision to report the disappearance of Maria Jose, aged 53, and Allison, aged 19, on July 25. This action marked the initiation of a police investigation into their mysterious disappearance. Investigations unveiled unsettling details. Both of their phones had been switched off since July 14, and no credit card transactions were recorded. Furthermore, there was no trace of the mother and daughter at Toulouse or the Perpignan train station, both logical departure points given that they did not possess a car or driver's licenses for independent travel. Interviews with friends and family firmly ruled out the possibility of them running away, particularly in Allison's case, as she was deeply enthusiastic about her life in Perpignan and her dream of becoming a beauty queen. A delegate from the Miss France Committee shared in an interview that participating in the competition had been Allison's dream, and she had been highly motivated. She also recounted how Allison would frequently call for advice on what to wear in the days leading up to events. Additionally, she emphasized Allison's punctuality and her habit of notifying them if she was running late, making her sudden absence without explanation all the more perplexing. The investigation naturally focused on Paco, as he was the last person known to have seen them alive. Compounding his situation, the ongoing issues with his ex-partner and revelations of his double life made him the prime suspect. Media coverage of the case intensified, and the French public became engrossed in the unfolding mystery. Journalists crowded the street where the family's house was located, and passers-by didn't hesitate to direct accusations at Paco. On August 5, 3 weeks after the disappearance of his ex-wife and daughter, 50-year-old Paco was tragically discovered deceased. He had taken his own life by hanging himself in the barracks of the Foreign Legion, where he worked as a recruitment officer. Forensic experts determined that his death occurred between 5 and 7 in the morning of that fateful day. Following Paco's tragic death, a series of emails and letters addressed to coworkers and family members came to light, along with a final video that was published on the website of a French magazine. In these messages, Paco expressed his enduring love for his wife and daughter, emphasizing that the burden of suspicion had pushed him to take his own life. One of Paco's last lovers recounted that he had vehemently maintained his innocence and couldn't bear the weight of being viewed as the prime suspect in a crime against his daughter and former wife. French media initially reported that Paco's suicide was driven by overwhelming guilt. However, Maria Jose's brother conveyed a different perspective when he spoke to journalists. He did not believe that his brother-in-law had harmed his family or played a role in their disappearance. He described the last time he had seen Paco on Sunday, August 4, as a moment when Paco appeared utterly broken. Paco had described himself as a man of honor, but with nothing left to lose. During that interaction, he also shared his suspicion that his sister had left their home in a fit of anger and might be in a place where she couldn't easily return due to the scandal surrounding her disappearance. These statements introduced doubt about Paco's guilt and even stirred feelings of sympathy and compassion for the deceased legionnaire. However, the same video and news of Paco's death brought forth a revelation that altered the course of the narrative. This revelation harkened back to 2004 and pertained to Simone, the woman with whom Paco had a double life. It emerged that upon learning of Paco's death through the news, Simone's relatives recognized him and promptly contacted the authorities. They revealed that Paco had been Simone's lover for 6 years until her inexplicable disappearance. In connection to this, one of Simone's sisters disclosed that shortly before vanishing, Simone had been hospitalized due to either a spontaneous abortion or an attempted suicide following a violent altercation with Paco. This fight reportedly occurred because Simone had discovered that Paco had not yet separated from his wife, Maria Jose. Tragically, Simone never reappeared, and Paco moved on with his life. As investigators compared both cases, they noted some striking similarities. Firstly, in both cases, the last sign of life from the women involved was a text message sent from their phones. Simone informing Paco that she was leaving, and Maria Jose sending a message to one of her daughters. These parallels raised questions and added a layer of complexity to the mystery surrounding the disappearances. Another notable similarity in both cases relates to the delay in reporting the disappearances by Paco. In November 2004, he waited for several days before reporting Simone's disappearance to the police, a pattern that raised suspicion, even though he could no longer be prosecuted for the crimes committed. In late September 2013, a report raised disturbing questions. It was revealed that in mid-July, Paco had purchased a significant quantity of lye, a chemical known for its ability to degrade DNA, making it challenging for forensic experts to detect traces of cleaned blood at a crime scene. During meticulous forensic examinations, officials from the crime lab discovered compelling evidence of a substantial blood spill that had been meticulously cleaned both in the residence where Maria Jose and Allison lived and in the barracks where Paco worked. Specifically, blood was confirmed to be present in the drainage of a freezer. A fellow soldier recounted that on July 17, he had assisted Paco in transporting this freezer from his home to the Legion's headquarters. The same witness informed the police that he had seen traces of blood in a clogged sink within Paco's apartment. Moreover, officials found indications of blood in the room that Paco occupied within the barracks and within a washing machine where he had been observed washing sheets and clothing. Other unsettling details centered around the alleged disappearance of approximately 30 bed sheets from the military installation in July. Additionally, there were reports of a soldier who had witnessed Paco using a hose to clean a carpet from which a reddish liquid was emerging, a situation the man had explained as a result of staining while defrosting meat. Despite the high hopes generated by these revelations, the police faced difficulties in conclusively establishing the connection between Allison's DNA and the traces of washed blood or determining whether it resulted from the young girl's contact with the analyzed items. But her mother's blood DNA was found in the family washing machine. The neighbors also recalled Paco switching his vehicle from a white car to a dark van around the time of their disappearance. The van was subsequently seized by the police for further examination, although initial tests did not yield any immediate results. Nevertheless, the introduction of this new evidence into the case file only served to intensify suspicions of criminal involvement by Paco. As discussions surrounding Paco's possible connection to the disappearances gained momentum, reactions from those who knew the family were swift. Allison's former boss expressed how the entire community was deeply shaken by the unfolding story. Allison had been a beloved and dedicated employee at the hair salon, and her absence had a profound impact on the clientele. To them, it was inconceivable that her father could be linked to her disappearance. An unnamed family member told French media that Allison had been actively trying to understand the true nature of Paco. She questioned why her affectionate father was frequently absent, including during holidays like Christmas. She even harbored suspicions that her father might have had a double life with another family elsewhere and was possibly tracking one of his lovers on the internet. These revelations added layers of complexity and intrigue to the already perplexing case. Maria Jose's brother, whom we've mentioned previously, shared the ongoing anguish that his family endured 5 months after that fateful July 14. He revealed that their desperation had not subsided since the beginning of the ordeal. He described how his life had come to a standstill, often disrupted by sleepless nights where he would turn to his computer in search of answers. He also expressed deep concern for his nephews, Maria Jose's other children, who had essentially been raised by Paco and affectionately referred to him as Dad. In contrast to his initial impressions after the disappearances, he stated that all the elements of the investigation seemed to point towards Paco as the primary suspect in the eyes of his family. However, he acknowledged that the evidence incriminating Paco was not sufficient to definitively prove that he had murdered Maria Jose and Allison. On the other hand, he remained open to the possibility that Paco might have had an accomplice. This theory arose from the last message allegedly sent by Maria Jose, which was written in impeccable French. He believed it couldn't have been Paco's work, as he struggled with the French language and had poor writing skills. He emphasized that at times when he communicated with Paco, he even had to ask him to rewrite sentences because they were incomprehensible. He vividly remembered Paco as a fiercely protective father who had never exhibited any signs of violence, making it inconceivable to him that Paco could harm his own daughter. He recounted that on the night before Paco took his own life, they spent 2 hours with him, and he appeared utterly devastated, continuously mentioning that he was going to do something reckless. Later that evening, Paco went to have dinner with one of his military colleagues, and when he called him again an hour later, Paco seemed calm. What struck him as very strange was the fact that he had to learn about the disappearances through television on August 1. In the midst of the turmoil, he reached out to Paco, who explained the disappearance and the supposed journey undertaken by Maria Jose and Allison. Paco reminded him that Maria Jose had left their home for 4 days on a prior occasion. Additionally, Paco apologized for not being in touch and claimed to have lost his contacts. 1 year after Allison and her mother's inexplicable disappearance, the judge in charge met with Maria Jose's brother, who had become the main civil party involved in the perplexing case. In that conversation, Maria Jose's brother was informed that investigations were still ongoing, reigniting a glimmer of hope that someday they might uncover the truth. Following this meeting, Maria Jose's brother candidly admitted that he woke up every morning with the hope of receiving a call informing him that they had been found. Although he had become more cautious and less optimistic over time, he underscored the importance of discovering the whole truth. He had become convinced of Paco's involvement in his family member's disappearance when Marie's DNA was found in the washing machine. He acknowledged that his life had essentially come to a halt since his sister and niece vanished. He dedicated all his time to collecting, comparing, and assembling evidence, driven by an unwavering determination to uncover the truth. Almost 3 years after the mysterious disappearances, it appeared that definitive evidence was within reach, though investigators exercised caution in their pursuit of the truth. During that time, bone fragments were discovered on a secluded beach. The seemingly human bones were stumbled upon by none other than Maria Jose's own brother, who found them inside a plastic bag. He swiftly arrived at the scene after receiving a tip from a witness and immediately alerted the authorities. 5 investigators from the judicial police were tasked with conducting excavations, with the presence of a forensic doctor who played a crucial role in extracting the bones. The discovery prompted the investigation to determine the causes of death. The police announced that DNA analysis would be conducted in the following days, but the expected resolution did not materialize. The family's lawyer held a strong belief that these remains belonged to the 2 missing women. His conviction was grounded in the fact that shortly after their disappearance, it was determined through the location data of his cell phone that Paco had been in close proximity to the location where the bones were discovered. Indeed, in the months that followed July 2013, exhaustive searches had been carried out in that expansive sandy area, all to no avail. The most recent information regarding this enigmatic case dates back to the year 2021, indicating that the bodies of Maria and Allison had still not been located. The family's lawyer, in his assessment, contended that the case had been mishandled from the very beginning. He explained that the initial hours and days are crucial in solving a crime, and therefore the delayed report significantly impeded the investigation. In his view, the prospects of unraveling the mystery surrounding the disappearance of Maria Jose and Allison might have extinguished on the same day. Paco took his own life, carrying all his secrets to the grave. Born in Oregon in 1975, Stephen Nichols lived a mostly private life until the early 2000s. In his mid-20s, Stephen and his first wife, whose identity remains anonymous for safety reasons, moved to China. During their time there in 2003, she accused him of attempting to suffocate her and throw her off their 8th-floor balcony. Stephen denied these allegations and faced no criminal charges in China. The marriage eventually fell apart, and by 2005, he returned to the U.S. as a single man. He owned a 3-bedroom condo near Portland, Oregon, which was too large for just one person. This led him to search for a roommate online to occupy one of the empty bedrooms, a decision that would profoundly impact several lives. Julia Simmons, a single mom, took immense pride in her eldest daughter, Ronda Casto. Ronda was born on July 2, 1985, in Galveston, Texas, and possessed stunning beauty. Julia's joy was complete with the birth of her second daughter, Melanie, 5 years later. Ronda's striking beauty and charisma seemed destined to bring her success. During her teen years, she embarked on a modeling career, earning the admiration not only of Julia, but also of Jessica Colburn, Julia's best friend from high school. Ronda was not only photogenic, but also had a beauty that ran deeper than mere looks. In 2005, Julia came across Stephen's online advertisement for a roommate and felt it was a perfect fit. After an initial conversation, she found Stephen to be charming and promptly rented a room in his condo, moving in. Then one day, Ronda, a 20-year-old beauty, showed up at Stephen's door, leaving him utterly struck by her allure. She introduced herself, and he was instantly smitten. Stephen believed he sensed reciprocal interest from Ronda, though he couldn't be sure if it was wishful thinking on his part. Never considering himself a handsome man, Stephen believed his intelligence was his most appealing feature and that this attracted Ronda. Whatever her reasons, Ronda responded to Stephen's advances and soon moved into the condo, not as a roommate of her mother's, but as Stephen's girlfriend. Stephen wasn't content with just having Ronda's affection within 3 months of meeting her. He also developed feelings for Melanie, her sister who was still underage at the time. His infidelity remained hidden, and by 2008, although they hadn't married, Stephen and Ronda became parents to a daughter they named Ava. In the meantime, Julia relocated to another condo. Fully committed to motherhood, Ronda lavished Ava with love. However, she was not immune to the postpartum depression that affects a considerable number of women. Ronda was particularly distressed about the weight she had gained during her pregnancy, which posed a challenge to restarting her modeling career. Additionally, Stephen's prolonged absences and hesitancy to propose added to her emotional burden, causing her to feel neglected. Consequently, the relationship between the two began to deteriorate. Ronda's close friend, Jessica, knew about Stephen's infidelity and even asserted that he was physically abusive to Ronda. Despite this, Ronda tried to maintain the relationship for the sake of her daughter, Ava. Towards the end of 2008, both Stephen and Ronda took out life insurance policies, naming each other as beneficiaries, with Ava listed as a contingent beneficiary. In early 2009, Stephen decided to increase his insurance coverage to $1 million. Around the same time, Ronda resolved to return to her modeling career, recognizing the need to improve her physical condition first. Stephen suggested they go on a hike at Eagle Creek, a popular but potentially dangerous trail in the Columbia River Gorge. Ronda informed Julia of their plans and asked her to care for Ava for the day. Before leaving, Ronda made a lighthearted but eerie comment to her mother about the possibility of being murdered. She thought Stephen had planned the hike as a romantic setting to propose to her, or he had darker intentions such as pushing her off a cliff. On the morning of March 16, 2009, the couple woke up early, left their daughter Ava with Julia, and began their hike. Ronda captured the start of their outing with a photo of Stephen. However, the trip was cut short under mysterious circumstances. While ascending the slippery and moss-covered Eagle Creek Trail, they faced several challenges. The inconsistent weather made the trail wet and treacherous. They reached a particularly narrow part of the trail, where only one person could pass at a time. What transpired next remains an enigma, known only to the couple. According to Stephen's account, Ronda was in a playful mood and had jokingly draped a towel over her shoulders, dubbing herself Supergirl. She started running and then slipped, falling from a height of over 150 feet. Stephen claimed that he spent an hour looking for her through rain-soaked terrain. When he finally found her and attempted CPR, he collapsed from exhaustion. Back at home, Julia grew increasingly anxious as the day wore on. Eventually, Stephen awoke, but with no cell service to call for assistance, he made his way back to the trailhead. Around 6 p.m., he finally reached his car and called 911. Rescue arrived roughly an hour later, determining Ronda's injuries to be consistent with a fall. Her death was initially ruled an accident. In the aftermath, Julia received a visit from a chaplain, sent by the local fire department, who regretfully informed her that her daughter was gone forever. In the days that followed, Ronda's family and friends gathered to pay their last respects at her funeral. To Julia, Stephen's behavior during the ordeal seemed unusually detached and lacking in genuine grief. Although media coverage of the incident in 2009 was sparse, initial reports suggested that the police didn't suspect foul play. Despite this, county detectives took their investigation very seriously and began to scrutinize Stephen's account more closely. Julia's persistent insistence, driven by her hope of accusing Stephen of her daughter's murder, also played a pivotal role in prompting a more in-depth investigation. Stephen cooperated fully during police questioning. The forensic examiner reported that most of Ronda's injuries were below the waist and also found traces of various prescription medications for anxiety and depression in her system. While authorities stopped short of definitively ruling Ronda's death as an accident, Stephen was not charged with any crime. Shortly thereafter, he moved to another part of the state, taking Ava with him. Surprisingly, less than 6 months after Ronda's death, Stephen faced charges for sexually abusing a 13-year-old girl, allegations he has consistently denied. His legal troubles persisted when he attempted to claim Ronda's life insurance money. The insurance company refused the payout, arguing that the policy was void due to inaccuracies in the application. Furthermore, it remained uncertain whether Stephen, as the policy's beneficiary, might have been involved in Ronda's death. If so, he could be ineligible for the payout under Oregon law. A federal district judge later ruled that the $1 million should be placed in an interest-bearing account under court control. The insurance company's lawyers agreed that the money would go to the couple's daughter once she reached adulthood. Stephen's insistence on claiming the life insurance money only deepened suspicions about him, providing Julia with what she believed to be clear evidence of his ulterior, financially motivated motives for allegedly murdering Ronda. The legal process wasn't progressing as quickly as Ronda's mother had hoped. 4 years after the incidents in 2013, Stephen still had not faced any charges. Eager for a fresh start, he relocated to a distant yet familiar place, China. In this far-off but now recognizable setting, He moved to Wuxi, situated 120 kilometers from Shanghai. Here, he found employment as an English teacher for Chinese business professionals. According to his own account, Eva acclimated seamlessly, mastering Mandarin in just 2 months. Besides being fluent in Mandarin, she participated in dance courses, took taekwondo training, and started learning the piano. Progress was evident for Stephen as well, as he found love once more. Back in the United States, investigators were continuously working on Ronda's case, unbeknownst to Stephen. Julia, for her part, maintained his guilt and pressed the authorities. Then, in a turn of events that caught everyone off guard, true crime writer Stephen Jackson entered the picture in April 2014 and set things in motion. A grand jury reviewed the evidence and covertly indicted Stephen for murder. All the while, he remained in China, completely unaware of the judicial trap being set more than 11,000 kilometers away. The relationship between Stephen and his new partner, Landy, was growing stronger to the extent that Landy had stepped into a maternal role for Eva. Within less than a year, Stephen proposed to Landy, and she said yes. The couple planned to have 2 wedding ceremonies, one in the United States and another in China. To initiate their plans, Stephen and Eva flew to the US in February 2015, with Landy set to join them shortly thereafter. However, upon their arrival in San Francisco, airport personnel informed Stephen that there was an issue with his luggage. Instead of continuing on to his connecting flight to Oregon, Stephen was separated from Eva and taken into custody by detectives from San Mateo County, California. They interrogated him about Ronda's death, but he declined to discuss the matter. Despite his reticence, the questioning persisted for about 3 hours. Stephen was subsequently extradited to Oregon, while Eva was placed in the care of Ronda's family. Right after his arrest for murder, Stephen was charged with 2 counts of rape in the 3rd degree, and 3 counts of rape in the 4th degree, and 3 counts of 3rd-degree sodomy for allegedly engaging in sexual intercourse with Melanie, his sister-in-law, when she was a minor. Once again, Stephen denied all accusations and entered a not guilty plea. His attorney highlighted the unconstitutional nature of the 3-hour police questioning. The defense even assembled their own team of investigators to visit Eagle Creek Trail, aiming to demonstrate that Ronda's death was the result of an accidental fall. During this period, Stephen faced various pretrial hearings that delved into multiple issues, including the available evidence and the motive behind Ronda's death. The defense argued that her death had been an accident, raising questions about the necessity of a trial. On the other side, law enforcement revisited the site where Ronda fell and conducted an unusual test using crash test dummies matching her size and weight to explore the theory that she had been pushed. Despite mounting pressure, Stephen remained resolute in his denial of guilt, maintaining that he had genuinely loved Ronda. In August 2015, he attended a bail hearing. His lawyer, Arnold, scrutinized the scientific validity of the tests surrounding Ronda's fall and centered the defense on the notion that her death had been a tragic accident. Arnold emphasized that Ronda was the 4th fatality on that particular trail in just 6 months, arguing that similar incidents were more common than most people believed. Christopher, the forensic doctor, testified that Ronda's severe injuries were all below her waist, suggesting she had primarily landed on her legs and pelvis. Arnold interpreted this as evidence that Ronda had slipped feet first. If she had been pushed, the injuries would have been more widespread across her body. However, Julia countered these arguments by stating that Stephen had ample motive to harm her daughter, accusing him of being both abusive and unfaithful. A bail amount of $2 million was set, and Stephen, unable to secure this sum, returned to jail. Meanwhile, Jessica mustered the courage to visit the location where her best friend Ronda had fallen for the first time. By May 2017, after numerous hearings debating the admissibility of evidence, including Stephen's admission of a sexual relationship with Melanie, it seemed that his long-awaited trial was approaching. But in a twist that shocked and disappointed Ronda's loved ones, a settlement conference led to a surprising outcome. The prosecution and defense reached an agreement allowing Stephen to plead guilty to lesser charges, specifically criminal negligent homicide and coercion, thereby removing the murder charge from the equation. The assistant county prosecutor acknowledged that while they believed Stephen was guilty, the challenge lay in the lack of adequate evidence to bring before a jury. To secure a murder conviction, the prosecution needed to demonstrate Stephen's intent in causing Ronda's death. As defense attorney Arnold emphasized, there was a dearth of concrete evidence, only vague hints and conjectures. Complicating matters further, a significant amount of evidence was lost when the detective handling the case retired and wiped his computer files. This development was a devastating blow for Julia, who was left angry and frustrated. Jessica was also in disbelief, seeing it as a glaring gap in the justice system. Arnold consistently defended his client, arguing that innocent individuals often enter guilty pleas to achieve a particular outcome. He stated that dropping the charges enabled Stephen to continue pursuing custody of his daughter, Ava. The defense was aware of various issues plaguing the juvenile court system, where delays could significantly impede a child's reunion with their parents. Stephen himself confirmed that this was the sole reason he agreed to the deal. He received credit for time already served and was placed on a 3-year probation. His ankle monitor was removed, effectively ending his time in incarceration. Back on the streets, he remained concerned about the situation with Ava. But in 2018, in an explosive television interview, Stephen admitted for the first time to behaving inappropriately with a minor and also acknowledged having sexual relations with Melanie.
But that's Melanie?
Correct. What were you thinking? I wasn't. It was a very stupid decision. When questioned about killing one sister to be with the other, he remained evasive, even defiant. Moreover, he told a new story on camera, stating that Ronda didn't slip, but, due to postpartum depression, took her own life.
But lead people to think that you killed one sister to be with the other sister.
You can believe whatever you want. Some people are gonna believe that I'm innocent. Some are gonna think I'm guilty. So, I believe what you want to believe. Julia reacted strongly to his claims, asserting that, despite the medication her daughter was on, Ronda would have been incapable of making such a decision, especially considering how much she loved Ava. However, this turn of events further complicated Stephen's quest to regain custody of his daughter. Adding another layer of complexity to the already intricate case, Julia was sentenced to 30 days in a rehab facility and received a 3-year probation term after admitting to unlawfully claiming $39,124 in Social Security benefits meant for her granddaughter. She was also mandated to repay the sum. While some reports suggest that a 2018 ruling terminated Stephen's parental rights and placed Ava in foster care, there is no official confirmation of this. Meanwhile, the insurance payout from her mother's policy remains in a bank account, set to be accessible when Ava turns 18. Currently a teenager, Ava continues to be under state care. Juan Fernando Hermoso Suarez came into the world on February 28, 1976, amidst the picturesque province of Sucumbios in Ecuador. His early life was shrouded in mystery, with no concrete information about his biological father and his mother, a humble laundry worker, struggling to provide for him. Consequently, when Juan was just a year old, destiny intervened, leading to his adoption by Rafael Hermosa and Zoila Suarez, a compassionate couple longing for children. They resided in a small and tranquil city in Ecuador until 1982, when a significant change transpired. Rafael sold their farm, and the family relocated to Quito, the vibrant capital of Ecuador. Initially, Juan's life appeared to follow a typical trajectory. He experienced the ups and downs of childhood, marked by occasional erratic moods. However, a pivotal moment occurred when he was around 7 years old. A young girl named Gloria entered the Hermosa family's life, altering its course. Gloria, at the tender age of 14, unveiled a startling revelation. She was Juan's sister. Gloria sought refuge with the Hermosa family, as her stepfather had cast her aside. Rafael and Zoila, known for their compassion, welcomed Gloria into their home. As time passed, Gloria found herself alone with Juan and chose to share a life-altering secret. Juan was adopted. This revelation, delivered without much consideration for his age and emotional readiness, left Juan grappling with profound questions. Gloria's presence also brought strife into the household, as she frequently disparaged Rafael and Zoila to Juan. Her tales included speculations about theft and flight from their home. Gloria's turbulent and disruptive behavior made it difficult for her to coexist with the Hermosa family, and she soon moved on. Juan's response to this revelation was tumultuous. As he mustered the courage to confront his adoptive parents, tears welled up in his eyes. He posed the painful question of whether it was true that Rafael and Zoila were not his biological parents. Faced with the heart-wrenching truth, they had no choice but to share the details of Juan's adoption. Some people have the notion that criminal behavior can be attributed solely to the influence of one's upbringing. In this case, Juan's adoptive parents, though imperfect, made sincere efforts to guide him down the right path. Nevertheless, it became increasingly evident that Juan's trajectory was far from conventional. Juan's journey took a tumultuous turn as he spiraled into rebellion. Crossing the boundary of typical childhood behavior at the tender age of 9, it was during these formative years that he began a disturbing pattern of animal cruelty, primarily targeting cats. He would macabrely bring their lifeless remains to school, seeking to shock and garner attention. Unsurprisingly, these actions resulted in multiple expulsions from school. In an attempt to curb his unruly behavior, Rafael, his adoptive father, resorted to occasional corporal punishment. Yet his discipline never escalated to a level that could be deemed excessive. In fact, it was evident that Juan did not hold any lingering grudges against Rafael or Zoila, his adoptive mother. Rafael's work commitments frequently led him to travel, leaving Juan with more unsupervised time. Although Zoila provided some company, her hearing impairment and struggles with arthritis prevented her from being a constant presence. Consequently, Juan found himself increasingly isolated. Completing elementary school at the age of 12 was a significant accomplishment for Juan, given his penchant for petty theft. He had already embarked on a path of pilfering, selling whatever items he could lay his hands on. Remarkably, his criminal endeavors thus far had entailed relatively low levels of risk. However, at the age of 13, Juan became embroiled in a reckless car theft escapade alongside older boys. Assuming the role of a passenger, they initially evaded capture. Their audacious greed, however, led them to steal yet another vehicle, resulting in their apprehension. Juan's subsequent placement in a juvenile correctional facility underscored the urgent need for reform within these institutions. In the majority of cases, these facilities only serve to further entrench delinquent behavior, treating these young individuals as hardened criminals. The meager mental assistance provided took the form of disconnected lectures, falling short of addressing their unique needs. Ultimately, these facilities inadvertently fostered camaraderie among these youths, often amplifying the influence of the already deeply troubled. Contrary to expectations, Juan found himself targeted within the correctional facility, not due to his physical stature or menacing appearance, but as a victim of severe bullying. physical assaults, and harsh verbal taunts became a daily ordeal. Amid this grim backdrop, a fellow inmate named Luis Anibal, merely 2 months older than Juan, entered the scene. Sharing a background of financial hardship, Luis's mother worked as a cleaner, but he had not been placed for adoption. Luis's circumstances were even more dire, with an abusive stepfather, mistreatment of his mother, and his sister subjected to similar horrors. Luis Anibal found himself on a perilous path marked by thefts and altercations, eventually leading him to the correctional facility. His presence there was not the consequence of a specific crime, but rather a desperate measure enacted by his mother, who hoped to redirect him onto the right track, only to inadvertently exacerbate his situation. Extended stays in the correctional facility, combined with shared experiences and a profound sense of disconnection from mainstream society, brought together these young men who struggled to forge connections elsewhere. In a bold endeavor, they even hired a taxi driver on an hourly basis to impart driving lessons. In no time, they became proficient behind the wheel of a car, coincidentally a taxi. The prospect of learning to drive infused these young men with excitement, for it heralded the initiation of their car theft endeavors. Their maiden foray into auto theft involved the Hyundai Accent, a venture that left no casualties, except for Juan and Anibal themselves, who, presumably due to nerves, met with a road mishap. Providentially, their escapade went unnoticed, and they managed to elude capture. Their subsequent car theft also ended in an encounter with law enforcement. However, they had meticulously prepared for such an eventuality, carrying counterfeit credentials purporting them to be the offspring of officers stationed in Quito. It goes without saying that these claims were entirely fabricated, unbeknownst to the genuine officers. Fortuitously for the boys, they were intercepted by a sergeant and a corporal who were unacquainted with the officers they impersonated, hence readily accepting the spurious credentials. Inquisitive officers questioned the boys about the car, intuitively discerning that it was unusual for the child of an officer to possess such a vehicle. Displaying remarkable cunning, the boys explained that it was a stolen car their father had managed to recover. The officers, harboring suspicions, suggested changing the vehicle's tires. It's important to note that some may not be familiar with the prevalent practice in Latin America, where police recover stolen cars, strip them of valuable parts for resale, and subsequently lay blame on the thieves for causing damage to the vehicle. The boys consented, offering to replace any components with lower quality substitutes in exchange for monetary compensation. The officers agreed, and an arrangement that left all parties content ensued. This modus operandi persisted for a while, initially yielding limited results. While leaving a disco with friends on November 22, 1991, the Juan and his group took a taxi. Hermosa pulled out a pistol obtained through a guard, shooting the driver in the head and killing him instantly. One of his friends then drove the vehicle to the southeast of the city and disposed of the body in the Los Chios Valley, where the body was found by police the next day. A week later, Hermosa went with other members of his gang to a hairdresser where he usually fixed his hair, operated by a transgender named Charlie. Charlie invited them to drink at home, where they started an argument which ended in Hermosa shooting Charlie 5 times before he could ask for help. Hermosa's crimes totaled 22 murders, occurring in only 4 months, claiming the lives of 8 taxi drivers, 11 homosexuals, a truck driver and his acquaintance, as well as 2 others, earning him the nickname the Kid of Terror. The victims were shot to death with a pistol, the crimes occurring during the weekends, which caused a panic among the taxi drivers and homosexuals who lived in northern Quito. One fateful morning, patrolling officers were alerted by what sounded like gunshots, prompting them to initiate the strategic sweep of the vicinity. Guided by the direction of the gunshots, they arrived on an almost deserted street, where a taxi was observed traversing the area. Reacting swiftly, the officers accelerated, overtaking the taxi and discerning the presence of several minors inside. Recognizing that the police were in pursuit, the young individuals accelerated, yet the officers were undeterred, maintaining their vigilance. And when they realized that escaping in the taxi wasn't going to be possible, they stopped and opened all 4 doors to run in opposite directions. They were only able to capture one suspect, and that was Luis Aníbal. Luis was taken to the police station, and they began questioning him to get a confession, but he didn't utter a single word. Days passed, along with threats because the taxi he fled from belonged to a man who had been murdered a few hours earlier. Still, Luis remained silent until a group of boys came to visit him to see what was going on with him. This seemed odd to the police because they had kept this capture hidden, and only a few relatives knew that Luis was there. These boys, seeing that Luis couldn't get out, left the place. But the officers, seeing that the presumed suspects were minors, and their profile matched perfectly, assigned an undercover officer to see what their next moves would be. Throughout the day, the detective saw that these boys seemed to spend the whole day together, hanging out in the streets. In the evening, they entered a nightclub, and more agents were called to see if they would take the bait that was about to be set. In the early morning, when the boys left the nightclub, a taxi passed nearby, and they stopped it. Several agents were already following the taxi, and indeed, these boys had the intention of assaulting the taxi driver, but he was also an agent, and practically the whole gang of terror was captured. But their leader, Juan, had not been with them. Under pressure, the boys confessed, but they claimed they were not responsible for the murders and that Juan Carlos was the culprit. Juan Carlos was the name Juan Fernando used to have a different identity as a criminal and protect his real identity. In contrast, Luis used the alias Santiago. The police began to investigate Juan Fernando Hermosa and found his address. At that time, Juan lived with Zoila, and Rafael was not at home. On January 14, 1992, in the early morning, several officers began to surround Juan's house and entered through a skylight. Juan realized this, grabbed his gun, and a shootout ensued. Unfortunately, since he was sleeping in the same bed with his mother, and she may not have heard due to her deafness, she stayed in bed. In the exchange of fire, Zoila was hit by 19 bullets, leading to her death. Juan attempted to escape, threw a grenade at the police, and when he was climbing out of a window to escape, he was captured. Subsequently, following Juan's grenade launch, testimonies surfaced from both Juan and the neighbors, attesting that it was, in fact, the police who had lobbed the grenade. Countless enigmas envelop the circumstances leading to Zoila's tragic fate. It raises questions about why she was swiftly transported away in an ambulance when it was patently evident that she had already departed from this world. Standard procedure dictates that when someone is unmistakably deceased, they should remain at the scene for forensic evaluation. Upon his arrival at the police precinct, Juan unambiguously declared, as I quote, "I want to clarify that my name is Juan Fernando Hermosa Suarez, and on February 28th, I will celebrate my 16th birthday." This stratagem was employed to exploit legal provisions, given his status as a minor, and it elicited an explosion of media coverage. Juan ascended to a newfound level of notoriety, capturing the headlines in every newspaper. On numerous occasions, he participated in interviews for which he received compensation. Juan took all the blame for himself and wanted to leave his companions out of it. However, seeing that he also didn't want to receive many years in prison, he began to create excuses, claiming that a supposed general, who does exist, had hired him to commit all these crimes because of the death of his daughter, which was attributed to a supposed taxi driver. This was taken seriously because the other kids also started saying the same thing. The authorities were so stirred by this that they seriously began to investigate the general. They asked these kids about how he looked, and they said he was of average height and had prominent hair, but that wasn't accurate. He was tall and always had a military haircut. It also makes perfect sense that a general with all the connections in the world would hire a 15-year-old kid like Juan, who was a complete stranger. The authorities dismissed the accusations, and Juan began to make more excuses. Now he claimed that the taxi drivers were responsible for their own deaths. Clearly, he was still a child. He insisted that the last thing he wanted was to kill. He stated, "I asked them to stay still, that nothing would happen to them. But that didn't happen. Once again, I was threatened with a revolver, so I used my weapon. And a taxi driver tried to hit me with a lug wrench, so I was also forced to shoot." But even if that were true, this excuse wouldn't hold up because he had murdered 22 people by that point. There was no way he could be saved because he was young. It's not like he was suddenly going to turn his life around, and Juan confirmed this. At the time of his trial, Juan was already 16 years old and was sentenced to just 4 years at an orientation center because that was the maximum penalty for a minor in Ecuador. Juan underwent several psychological exams, which mostly described him as an organized psychopath. This type of psychopath tends to be natural leaders, and it was within 16 months of being in that center that Juan formed a gang and devised a plan to escape. He had a girl who had accompanied him in a previous taxi robbery arranged to meet him on the day of his visits. They had agreed that she would deliver a pistol to him so he could escape. In a juvenile center, the security wasn't as high, and Juan knew that at some point there would only be one guard watching the exit. When this happened, he seized the opportunity and shot the sole remaining guard with 5 shots, causing his death. Immediately, Juan and 10 other young people managed to escape from there. The news once again exploded, and somehow, Juan quickly managed to escape to Colombia, reaching Bogota. He began to live off the sale of stolen jewelry, but being in a new country where he was also being pursued, he couldn't steal as easily as he could in Ecuador. So shortly after, he was found, and tired of going hungry, he told the police, "Yes, I am Juan Fernando Hermosa," and he was sent back to Ecuador. He was temporarily placed in a high-security cell, but was soon returned to the same orientation center from which he had escaped before. However, this time, he didn't escape again. He didn't even serve the initial 4-year sentence they had given him, despite having killed a guard and escaped to Colombia. Many couldn't believe it, but in January 1996, Juan was already free. And this obviously caused a lot of resentment in many people who saw the judicial system as a failure. Juan returned to his childhood town, where he began to live with Rafael. In the early days, Juan seemed enthusiastic about finding a job, but no one wanted to hire him until Rafael contacted a friend who could give Juan a job in a bus collecting money. He started working and gradually began to enjoy the nightlife again, although it is assumed that he only went out to party and consume alcohol. On February 26, 1996, Juan had gone out with some friends to a bar around 10 p.m. At 12, the bar owner asked him to leave because the more the other customers consumed alcohol, the more they expressed their disgust for Juan, as his face and what he had done were known throughout the country. He had no choice but to board a bus and leave. 2 days later, Rafael received a call from the police, informing him that they had found what appeared to be his son's body near a river. The body was unrecognizable, not due to decomposition, but because it had been beaten, tortured, and assaulted in every possible way, even run over by a car, with his hands tied with wire. He was only identified as Juan because he had his identification in his pockets, and next to the body, they had left a newspaper clipping that said, "The Hermosa Syndrome throughout the country." The body was found on the same day that Juan was supposed to turn 20. Some say that the perpetrators were contacts of the officers he had deals with, but it could have been anyone because this young man had made enemies from all sides. Oakley Carlson's journey began on December 6, 2016, in Oakville, Washington, but her upbringing was far from ordinary. She came from a family facing numerous challenges. Her parents, Jordan Bowers and Andrew Carson, had their fair share of troubles. Andrew had a brief stint as a police officer, but got dismissed due to misconduct, although it didn't lead to any criminal charges. On the other hand, Jordan had a history marked by serious drug and theft-related offenses, and both grappled with substance abuse. Their family had been under scrutiny since 2013 due to various complaints about how they were raising their children. In August 2017, Jordan initiated a crowdfunding campaign in a bid to gather support for hiring a lawyer. Child Protective Services had taken custody of their children following a report that they weren't providing proper medical care to one of their daughters, who had health issues affecting her growth and weight. During that same period, 8-month-old Oakley found herself in the care of Eric and Jamie Jo Hiles. The Hiles were caring school teachers who had a deep longing to become parents. Their journey to become Oakley's foster parents began when a former student of theirs informed them that the granddaughter of his hairdresser needed a foster home and would eventually be put up for adoption. He suggested that they offer a loving home, and they wholeheartedly agreed. As Oakley grew, she blossomed into a joyful child who loved to bring smiles to everyone around her. Her passion for dancing led to her enrollment in dance classes. She also possessed an extraordinary ability to memorize stories and was exceptionally bright, radiating love in the Hiles home. Jamie and Eric were always honest with Oakley, explaining that although she didn't come from Jamie's belly, she came from her heart. The couple cherished her deeply and had dreams of adopting her. However, in October 2019, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families made the difficult decision that Oakley should return to live with her biological family, despite the Hiles' concerns. In November 2019, just a week shy of her 3rd birthday, Oakley bid farewell to Jamie and Eric, returning to live with Jordan, Andrew, and her siblings. Jamie later shared in an interview the heart-wrenching experience of letting go of Oakley on the day before Thanksgiving dinner. It was a tearful farewell, filled with uncertainty about whether they'd ever have the chance to see her again. They remained vigilant about Oakley's well-being, as they had lingering concerns about Jordan and Andrew's ability to care for and protect her. Regrettably, the concerns of Oakley's foster parents were not unfounded. In 2020, Oakley spent Christmas with her paternal grandparents, who were deeply alarmed by her condition. She had developed noticeable dark circles under her eyes, had sores on her face, and appeared pale and bruised. Worried for her safety and well-being, the grandparents reached out to Child Protective Services, but it seemed that their report only ignited a significant family dispute. Following that disturbing incident, Andrew's parents had no further contact with Oakley or her parents. Nearly a year later, on November 6, 2021, just before 5 p.m., Andrew contacted the authorities to report a house fire that had occurred earlier that same day. According to his account, Oakley accidentally set the sofa on fire while playing with a lighter. Andrew explained that he and his wife had battled the flames for 4 hours, but despite their best efforts, the fire had spread to the 2nd floor of their home. This raised eyebrows among the firefighters, primarily due to the considerable delay between the start of the fire and its reporting. Andrew attributed the delay to the chaotic situation, as neither he nor his wife could locate their cell phones to call for assistance. Given the inconsistencies in the information provided, officials launched a thorough investigation into the incident. Their findings revealed that the fire had actually originated in the microwave, contradicting the initial report of the sofa being the source of the blaze. In the aftermath of the fire, a close family friend organized an online fundraiser, explaining that the fire had devastated the upper part of their house, resulting in the loss of most of their belongings. Several days later, Jessica, the local school director, whose daughter was friends with one of the Carlson girls, decided to visit the family. They were staying at an inn at the time, and she aimed to deliver supplies and offer support. Upon her arrival, she immediately noticed Oakley's absence and inquired about her whereabouts. She was informed that Oakley was grounded. Subsequently, she sent a school collie to make another supply delivery, but this visit lasted only 5 minutes. The collie became increasingly concerned that Oakley was not present with her siblings on that day. Growing ever more alarmed about the perplexing absence of the child, Jessica seized an opportunity during a visit from Oakley's younger sister, who was spending the night at her place, to gently inquire about Oakley's whereabouts. To her shock, the 6-year-old girl responded with visible irritation, stating that Oakley no longer existed and had been taken in by her adoptive parents. This startling revelation prompted Jessica to take immediate action. She promptly contacted the County Child Protective Services office, expressing her deep concern about Oakley's safety and requesting a welfare check to ensure the child's well-being. On December 6, 2021, authorities conducted a visit to the hotel where Oakley's family had been staying after the fire, with the aim of assessing the situation regarding the missing child. Jordan greeted them at the door, holding a 2-year-old child in her arms, and indicated that the family was in the process of packing up. The ensuing conversation was fraught with unsettling signs. When questioned about Oakley's whereabouts, Jordan responded that Oakley was with her foster mother. The officer pressed her to confirm if she was indeed the child's mother, to which she affirmed. However, when asked again about her daughter's location, Jordan's response was to turn around and seek confirmation from someone else in the room if the child was with her foster parents. At this juncture, the officer beckoned Andrew closer to the entrance and posed the same question about his daughter's whereabouts. He replied that Oakley was with his parents, referring to the child's grandparents, but admitted he did not have their address or phone number. Eventually, he provided this crucial information to the police. According to official records, the officers reached out to Andrew's father, who disclosed that they had not seen their granddaughter since December 2020 when she had spent Christmas with them. Subsequently, authorities visited the grandparents' residence in person, confirming that the child was indeed not with them. Realizing their investigative options narrowing, they contacted social services personnel to inquire if the child was in foster care. However, according to the officials, the child should have been with her biological parents. Upon returning to the Carlsons' hotel room, the officials informed Andrew that the child was not with her grandparents. Rather than displaying concern, he appeared oddly indifferent, as if he had prior knowledge of the information they had just conveyed. Jordan's reaction, while different, was equally perplexing. She erupted in anger, tightly clenched her fists, and declared her refusal to answer their questions before promptly retreating to the room. For the authorities, it was becoming increasingly apparent that the Carlsons were harboring something. Adding to their concerns was a peculiar observation made regarding the family's vehicle parked at the hotel. There was only one child safety seat, despite the fact that they were supposed to have 4 children, all under the age of 10. On the same day, around 2:00 p.m., Jessica, the school director, contacted the police to report an unusual incident. Jordan had called the school during regular school hours, citing an emergency and expressing the need to pick up her 6-year-old daughter. Acting on the cautionary side, the authorities promptly instructed the school not to release the child to her parents. However, the warning turned out to be unnecessary, as Jordan and Andrew failed to show up at the school. Approximately an hour and a half after the call, 32-year-old Jordan and 36-year-old Andrew departed the hotel with their 2-year-old child, but their departure did not go unnoticed. Both of them were arrested for obstruction as they adamantly refused to cooperate with the ongoing investigation. Simultaneously, on the same day, the police made a public appeal on social media, seeking assistance from the community to help locate Oakley. According to a report from a local newspaper, this marked a turning point as Child Protective Services assumed custody of the 2- and 6-year-old children. As for the 9-year-old, The identity of the guardian who assumed custody remained undisclosed. The family's residence and property underwent a thorough examination, with detectives from the county police and the FBI working together. Despite their meticulous search of the house, they found no sign of the missing girl or any evidence suggesting she had been living there recently. What stood out was that while all her siblings had designated bedrooms, there was no indication of a room for Oakley, and her clothing and toys were noticeably absent. A significant discovery for the ongoing investigation was the presence of bloodstains on the blinds, the front door, and a handprint on one of the walls. On December 6, Andrew and Jordan found themselves in the county jail, each with a bond set at $150,000 and a 72-hour hold, all due to suspicions of involuntary manslaughter. However, as the investigations progressed, additional charges were brought against them in the following days. They now faced allegations of second-degree abandonment of a dependent person. This new charge stemmed from the authorities' discovery that, for approximately 15 months, the couple had failed to provide their 6-year-old daughter with the prescribed medical treatment, resulting in a severe decline in her health that posed a risk of death. The police clarified that this was the sole charge that would keep them detained, and the bond remained in effect. Oakley's paternal grandparents issued a statement, emphasizing their full cooperation with the investigation and their singular objective, to locate their missing granddaughter. They also shared their prayers for the child's safe return and expressed gratitude for all those diligently working to find her. On December 13 of the same year, the search efforts officially concluded. Law enforcement authorities reported extensive searches that covered over 300 acres, scoring for any trace of the vanished child. The police affirmed that every inch of land had been meticulously examined, leaving no stone unturned. However, he underlined that the quest for truth regarding the fate of the little girl was far from over. Despite the parents' claims of having seen the child as recently as November 30, they were unable to provide any concrete information about her whereabouts or her current condition. Their inability to confirm whether the child was under the care of an adult further compounded the mystery. Yet, considering all the gathered evidence, detectives established a troubling timeline. Oakley had not been seen alive since January 27, 2021. It led them to a grim conclusion that the child couldn't possibly have survived on her own for such an extended period. Given these revelations, authorities issued a heartfelt plea to anyone who may have come into contact with Oakley since January 2021 or had interactions with her parents during that time to step forward with any information they might possess. Furthermore, court documents unveiled disturbing testimonies from Oakley's own siblings, who held the grim belief that their sister was no longer among the living. The eldest among them disclosed that their mother had strictly forbidden any discussion about Oakley. They recounted a tragic narrative in which Oakley had supposedly accidentally started a house fire using their mother's lighter, leading to physical abuse and her confinement in a cell beneath the stairs as a form of punishment. Their mother had allegedly told them that Oakley had ventured into the woods and met a tragic fate at the jaws of wolves. Another sibling recalled incidents where Jordan had used a belt to discipline Oakley and had locked her in a closet, expressing deep concerns about their sister's well-being and a haunting fear that she might have succumbed to starvation. Based on the available information, authorities were unable to determine whether Oakley was still alive before the house fire. It's worth noting that legal documents revealed a troubling history. Since 2013, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families had received a total of 11 records related to the Carlsons. Among these, 8 were closely examined in light of allegations involving domestic violence, physical abuse, parental drug use, and medical neglect. In February 2022, a significant development unfolded in the case against Jordan and Andrew. This time, they faced fresh charges for endangering their children by exposing them to a controlled substance. This shocking turn of events stemmed from the alarming discovery of dangerously high levels of methamphetamine in the bodies of two of their children. A month later, on March 14, it was reported in the media that Andrew had pleaded guilty to separate charges of endangering two of his children with drugs. Unfortunately, his guilty plea did not yield any information that could shed light on the circumstances surrounding Oakley's disappearance. It was also announced at that time that Andrew would face sentencing at the end of March, with the maximum penalty being 12 months of imprisonment. In response to these developments, concerned citizens gathered near County Jail, demanding that the Carlsons reveal the fate of their daughter. The protesters raised their voices, labeling Jordan as a monster rather than a mother. Among the demonstrators stood Oakley's foster mother, who expressed her dissatisfaction with the potential one-year sentence for the biological father, emphasizing that the children's trauma would extend far beyond that period. As planned, Andrew's sentencing hearing unfolded on March 28, conducted through a video call. The judge delivered a 12-month sentence for endangering the minors. While pronouncing the verdict, the judge directed her words toward the defendant, highlighting the fundamental duty of a parent to protect their children, a duty he had evidently failed to fulfill. Moreover, the judge imposed several restrictions on Andrew. These restrictions included a prohibition on consuming controlled substances. Additionally, he was mandated to undergo a chemical dependency assessment within 45 days of his release, follow a recommended treatment, and provide proof of compliance to the court for the subsequent 6 months following his release from prison. In early April 2022, shortly after Andrew's sentencing, Jordan also entered a guilty plea. She admitted guilt on the 2 charges of exposing her children to contact with a controlled substance. Consequently, on April 22, she received a 20-month prison sentence. Moreover, she was subject to a restriction that prevented her from having any contact with minors under the age of 18 without proper supervision. However, in January 2023, shortly after her release following her sentence related to 2 of her children, Jordan faced legal issues once again. This time, she was arrested for fraud and identity theft. Authorities revealed that she had fraudulently acquired 4 credit cards using personal information from friends and family. Interestingly, 3 of these illicitly obtained cards were discovered obstructing a toilet in the hotel room where the couple had stayed following their house fire. It was also disclosed that Jordan had spent over $40,000 using these cards, making purchases at Walmart and eBay, and even withdrawing cash for gambling at a casino. Jordan eventually reached a guilty plea agreement. Initially facing a 36-month sentence, the judge, exercising discretion, decided to impose a longer sentence. Consequently, Jordan was sentenced to 43 months in jail. Meanwhile, Oakley's foster parents have remained actively engaged in their relentless search for the missing child. They have continued to express their frustration and heartache, maintaining that the decision to return the girl to her biological parents was made hastily and put the child's well-being at risk, given that Andrew and Jordan were deemed unfit, both mentally and physically, to care for her. Oakley's disappearance had a profound impact on the public, evoking significant interest and empathy. The local community not only cooperated with law enforcement, but also assembled in front of the county courthouse on multiple occasions, demanding justice. Additionally, an online petition was launched in December 2021, amassing over 7,000 signatures. The petition sought to advocate for a support system aimed at safeguarding children who were returning to their families after exiting the foster care system. It also called for mandatory long-term drug testing for families reuniting with their children. This petition eventually evolved into a bill known as the Oakley Law. While it was reported in February 2023 that the bill had encountered obstacles in the Washington state legislature, it did prompt responses from representatives of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families in the state. These officials agreed to engage in discussions regarding policy and budget options, indicating a continued effort to address critical child welfare issues. The fate of Oakley remains shrouded in mystery, presenting a perplexing puzzle for investigators. Their most plausible scenario suggests that the young girl may have tragically lost her life. However, since her disappearance, an unsettling hypothesis has emerged that Jordan might have sold her. The investigation has grappled with an inundation of leads, which has proven to be one of its most challenging aspects from the very outset. The county police has been inundated with reports from all over the country, each suggesting potential sightings of the missing girl. They've diligently collaborated with law enforcement agencies across the United States, meticulously examining every lead.
Regrettably, none of these leads has yielded any information about Oakley's whereabouts. Another formidable hurdle faced by investigators was the absence of a clear timeline pinpointing when the girl disappeared. To construct a timeline, they had to painstakingly piece together who had interacted with Jordan, Andrew, and Oakley in the months leading up to her disappearance. This endeavor involved tracking down family members, school personnel, and scoring surveillance footage from various stores. The investigators acknowledged that it would have been relatively straightforward if they were dealing with a family or a group of people who adhered to a consistent, predictable routine. However, in this case, the family's movements were marked by unpredictability. As of the conclusion of this investigation, Oakley's parents had not provided any information concerning the child's fate, and both continued to be regarded as suspects in her disappearance. The investigations remains active and ongoing. In their relentless quest for clues, the police has extended an $85,000 reward